Seriously.
Indeed.
Nowhere to go with it.
Interested, do you? Well, I wasn't doing anything, so I pulled up all the steam. He's in for medicine and tea.
Oh yeah, stinging metal.
Yeah. They're all gone. Eh? What does that mean?
Yes, here's Jess. Show me.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great, isn't it?
We shouldn't.
Show me the potential.
Yeah.
Oh, you wanted to reconnect it? No.
Everything. Hide my confidential
Show me
paper.
the slate. Just waiting for the chalk to arrive.
Oh, yeah.
It's a palette. Yeah. Okay, right there. There you go. All right, councillors, staff, members of the gallery, welcome to the council meeting for Tuesday, the 22nd of September, and a great day it is. I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional country of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains region, and we pay our respects to elders past and present, and that we recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and relationships with the land, and we acknowledge that they are of continuing importance to the Kaurna people living today. Also read you the council pledge. We seek wisdom and understanding as we face the duties of our united task, praying for the peace and prosperity of our city. Please be seated. Just to remind folks that we're being recorded and as close to televised as we can afford in the humble city of Prospect. On leave, we have Neil, but we do have an apology from Councillor De Backer. And I now ask if there's any declarations by members of a conflict of interest, and start the batting by saying I have a material interest in item 10.3 because there is a small allowance that goes with that position on GOROC. And also item 10.8 because it concerns a conference opportunity for myself. Are there any other conflicts of interest that people wish to declare? Is it okay? Jazz, have you got enough there to record those? Thank you. Okay, next item is confirmation of minutes to the ordinary meeting of council for Tuesday, the 25th of August 2020. No questions? Somebody happy to move that we note them as a true and accurate record? Councillor Barnett, do you wish to speak to it? Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to it? No, thank you. Any further debate? All those in favour? Against, it is carried unanimously. Thank you. The next item is public question time, and the rules of that are in the gallery or on the desk up there for people to read. We have one question on notice, and then I'll ask for any questions without notice. Start at 7:02 because we have a time limit. And we have a question on notice received from Ms. Marilyn Kingston of 55 Boyle Street, Prospect, who I recognise in the gallery. Welcome back. Via the online form on Council's website. Question was, I'm following up from my previous question posed to Council last month. Subsequent to the meeting, I thought it only fair to conduct some form of community consultation in regards to the Vine Street Plaza redevelopment and my suggestion to incorporate a play area for younger children and their parents or carers. This has been very well supported, particularly because of its proximity in the hub and the fact that it would contribute to an effective daily use of the space, add to the flexibility of the space and inclusiveness for all members of Prospect community as well as visitors to the area. I've submitted a petition to the CEO, which has 267 signatures to date, which was placed on a bench at Gibbo's for a period of 16 days. My question to Council is as follows. Will this additional information and evidence of community support, as well as support from representatives of the Labor government, have any impact on the decision-making of the Council over incorporating a suitable play area? And I know I read the question out that states that Labor are in government. They're not. Maybe that's hopeful, but that's the question as it's put to us online. I'll now read out the response provided by staff. The petition referred to in item 7.2 of the council agenda tonight, in part suggests that a grassed area with age-appropriate play equipment for children be included in the refurbishment of the plaza, implementing a grassed area as part of the Vine Street Plaza upgrade. Council administration will, however, be repainting the hopscotch and snakes and ladders paver markings and reintroducing the outdoor for the purposes of the minutes. If you could state your name and address.
My name is Mark Standen, 7 Mawson Street, Nailsworth.
Fire away. You've got 5 minutes if you need.
Probably
Sorry, 3 minutes if you need it. My mistake with 5. 3.
This question is in relation to the current redevelopment of Prospect Gardens. Given the proposed scope and cost of the project, will there be a second round of community consultation?
Take the question. You happy to answer it, or
Through you, the Director.
Director?
Always the director, sorry.
Through the chair, I can confirm that consultation has closed on the Prospect Gardens Nunawerra place-based consultation. We're holding our council workshop on the 6th of October. We will be presenting the outcomes of that consultation and any proposed changes to that concept plan that we used as part of the consultation phase. And we look at putting a report to council at the October council meeting about the way forward. And I suggested that we may recommend that way forward is undertake further consultation.
Okay. Second part of the question was tree with an X on it, not a yellow ribbon, it's something else. What does that? How many trees will be lost as part of the current proposal?
Current proposal, no trees are proposed to be removed. Can I ask a question to confirm which tree it is?
Just for clarity, yes.
Is it the tree closest to the club rooms?
It's the tree closest to the new, it's between the new barbecue and the new park bench.
Through the chair, that trees have been identified. We had an audit, arborist undertaken an audit of all the trees. That tree's been identified with some severe termite damage. We're not looking at removing it at this stage. We're looking at what ways we can best treat that tree, but we're not proposing to remove it at this stage.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Two great answers. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Any further questions, Mr. Standard?
No,
Please feel free to
perfectly
leave
answered.
your seat in the gallery. There are no further items on that with regard to Nunawerra tonight. So if you wish to stay for the entire meeting, you can, but if you need to slip away, we understand. Are there any further questions from the gallery? Yes, if you'd like to come forward. The purposes of the minutes, if you could state your name and address.
Sure. Hello again. Marilyn Kingston, 55 Boyle Street, Prospect, 5082.
Welcome back. You have 3 minutes, if you need it.
Thank you for including me tonight, and I've got a further 60 odd signatures. My question is, does council consider that it is time for future planning in a more current and holistic way? By this I mean the changing landscape of Prospect through higher density housing resulting in apartments and construction of homes without any yards or gardens. It has certainly brought in more revenue through increased rates and increased small businesses turnover, but the cost has been and will be to the social fabric of our community. Families in future are likely to be deprived of what is now considered by leading authorities and health bodies as essential for physical and mental health and well-being of children and their families. Excuse me, I hate public speaking. My question is, should councils and town planners and developers focus on creating more inclusive and accessible outdoor spaces and activities for infants, children and families?
Thank you.
It's following on. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. That question I think stands on its own, and we'll give you some answers. And I'll kick off by saying that council has recognised the density increase in apartments on Churchill Road and spent enormous amounts of money on completely redeveloping George Whittle Reserve, which includes a skate park, about to start a playground and physical fitness equipment park on Charles Kane Reserve. And there is a requirement that the new development at 250 Churchill Road incorporates a park to council's satisfaction. The park on Charles Street, which is adjacent Churchill Road, also has had significant investment, a totally new design. We purchased a house next door to double the size of the park. So there's been significant investment on that Churchill Road corridor. And so that is recognition is turning into investment. Before I go to the CEO, I would note, I think the elected members haven't noted formally, but noted anecdotally, there are very few children living in those forms of accommodation in the apartments. We could ask for a report to confirm that, but I would suggest that there are less children living on Churchill Road now than there were before in the bigger family homes. I could be wrong, but we have invested to reflect the new density. CEO, did you wish to add to that answer?
No, I think, Chair, you've made it clear. I mean, the City of Prospect is committed to creating spaces for everybody. The issue for us is to make sure we have the right spaces in the right places. And an example is, of course, the Vine Plaza, where it's going to be a multi-use space, where we can accommodate something that will help families and children, but it's not designed as a playground, which has safety issues, which are very, very key. So absolutely, we need spaces for children and for families, and it's a question of having the right spaces for the right design.
Okay, thank you. So there's some answers to that question. It's a very good question. Did you have a further question? And there's no one left in the gallery. So it's...
Does the fact that so many people without any kind of, this was just a petition that was on a table that people willingly signed without any, does that sort of stand for anything in terms of, because what is there now, like the hopscotch area has been pretty minimal, and snakes and ladders, particularly for younger children. I'm talking about particularly preschoolers, because that is really utilised quite a lot, that area. I see kids hanging off, and I'm just wondering whether you're really considering their specific needs. Just in view of, I don't know how many of us here have got children and who've attempted to bring children up in an apartment, and I know at the moment there aren't, but most of these people are going to be people, probably students subsidised by families in a lot of the apartments from overseas, also young couples who haven't got to the point of having children yet. But
I need you to get to a question in this session. Sorry.
My question is, are you also including the fact that between the main roads, a lot of the homes are being developed now without gardens as well? So it's not just the apartments. So my question is, are you really able to recognise the difficulty for people who have young children and are in very limited spaces, indoor spaces? Because I'm just thinking of the future, really, because I'm just concerned that hasn't been a concern. And also, in regard to the Barker Street playground that was mentioned last month, it's really, as it is, it's really not an appropriate area for children to play in. That was suggested as an alternative space, but it's not safe. And, would the council also consider making that an area that would be better utilised than what it is at the moment?
Thank you.
Sorry, a few questions.
There are a few questions, and can I'll just try again from the chair. As an elected member, we ask these questions a lot, but there are a number of assumptions in your question which I just want to counter. First of all, yes, we've recognised the increase in density on Churchill Road, and I've already given you an answer to tell you we've spent an enormous amount of money on 3 parks along Churchill Road that we hadn't spent there for 40 years. So the first thing is yes and yes. So you are dead right, and the council has responded. Barker Gardens is provided as an alternate public space along Prospect Road. It doesn't include a playground in terms of equipment, but all the advice we get as elected members is that the move from childhood specialists is that you should not provide equipment for children which dictates how they play. As in a swing, all you can do in it is swing. You should provide things that enable children to use their imagination and play. Barker Gardens has got plenty of those sort of things. However, it's not fenced. In terms of the plaza out here, yes, we've thought about it being flexible in use. I've read you the answer about what the staff are recommending we put back, but we are under pressure from all sorts of different users of the plaza to provide a space that can be a platform for events, which means no grass and no equipment in the way. For markets, which means 3 by 3 metre marquees going up and down the plaza to have a market there, vegetable or craft or whatever, and to be used during street parties such as the terrific street parties, and enable it to be mobilised for that reason. So the plaza has an enormous number of things that it's supposed to be doing, children being one of the users of the space. In terms of the density of children in apartments, we don't have any actual evidence, but I've given you my anecdotal observations, is that there are no children being raised in apartments in Prospect. There may be in time, you raise a good point. And yes, that is part of our consideration. I go back to the evidence we've given on Churchill Road. I also recommend that the investment of council in its parks and its park strategy is worth a look. We spent a huge amount of money at Memorial Gardens, which is only less than 400 metres up this street. We're investing an enormous amount of money at Nganurra, the previous speaker, Broadview Oval Playground. I would say that this council has spent more money in this term on play spaces than any council prior. I could be wrong, but it's an enormous amount of money we're spending on play spaces. So I'm sorry, you asked a lot of questions. I'm giving you a lot of little bits of answers. I think it would be good in closing to suggest you catch up with myself or the CEO so we can give you all this information so you can go and think about that, and maybe if you have further questions, you come off of that basis. But just to confirm, this plaza has to do many, many things, and the staff are saying it can't be a dedicated play space because then it's only one thing. And that is, I guess, the tension you were addressing, and we're trying to find a compromise. And I refer you to the answer, which is read out, which will be part of the minutes. Staff would also be happy to discuss any other ideas with yourself to ensure the plaza has a number of different and attractive opportunities for child's play. So I recommend you enter into those discussions going forward.
Sounds good.
CEO, did you wish to add anything to that?
Just very quickly, Chair, we've heard about the preschoolers. We're very aware of things like the fairy doors and, you know, the fun things that will attract them. We've heard from mothers who want some time for themselves as they have a coffee. We're very, very sympathetic to preschool fun, imaginative things going on. And we're in those dialogues now. And so we're very happy to continue that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
No further questions?
Couldn't, but I won't.
We are running out of time in this session, I'm afraid. I think, in fact, we have it at the end of it. Thank you very much for your interest and concern, and please engage with the staff going forward. We're very keen to keep chatting.
Okay.
Thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the balance of the meeting if you wish, but if you need to slip away, we perfectly understand.
Sure.
Thank you very much. All right, that's the end of public question time. Members will now move on to petitions. Item 7.1, petition regarding parking in Tianu Avenue and Wilson Street Prospect. The recommendation is on page 2. Does anybody wish to move the recommendation as it's presented to us? Councillor Groot, do you wish to speak to it?
Look, I won't speak to it except to say that I know that this is an ongoing issue for people in these two particular streets. I think it's good that they've put the petition forward, and I understand that we will be having further conversations on this in the future, which I think will be good as well. So as much as it is tabled tonight at council, I think that's a good thing, and happy to move it to get it on the table and get it recognised by us as a council.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Harris, wish to speak to it?
No, I think the previous speaker has spoken, and as we go along, we'll look at it and get involved with it.
Thank you. Any further debate? There being none, Councillor Groot, you wish to sum up?
No, thank you.
That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 7.2, petition regarding the suggested inclusion of a play area for young children as part of the Vine Street Plaza redevelopment. The recommendations on page 5. Someone happy to move it in its current form? Councillor Barnett, do you wish to speak to it?
Only to say that I think, you know, petitions are a time-honoured over many decades, if not most probably longer, centuries. So I think it's a good way that we can, at council, receive items that interest our residents and visitors to the area. So the petition is just that, as it says, to receive and note the report. So I'm sure that we'll be having some more information come to us on this matter.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I'd like to thank the petitioner for the effort that's been put into going out to the public and gathering information about what the public is interested in doing. And I think it certainly made us have a think about it, whether we aren't going to move forward by putting a grassed area and a specific playground down there or not. is a little bit immaterial for me. It really has asked us to consider the way that we use our public spaces and to really keep on questioning what we should invest in, what we should make sure we're considering when we're doing our future planning, and keeping some items on the agenda, such as could we do something a little bit better with Barker Gardens or a portion of Barker Gardens. So I think it really has served a great purpose, and the conversation will keep on going. I'm sure it'll permeate through the discussions that we have when we're talking about future play spaces and what we should do with the land that we control around the city.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Groot, wish to speak to it?
Yeah, just wish to ask a question, actually, which I was going to do in questions without notice, but I might as well do it here because it does relate to this item. So certainly hearing what's been said by the question tonight, I'm curious to know whether so I just want to separate out the issue of grassed versus playground. So playground I'm going to leave to one side. But in terms of grassed area, the question is it possible that we could include some grassed area in Vine Plaza, which would serve multiple purposes? One, soften the space. I'm just thinking through having marquees up and down. Is that would having grass in the Vine Plaza be detrimental to that? Probably not. It's flat, so we can still have events and things like that on top of it. It provides a bit of a softening to what's otherwise a very large concrete area. I guess my question is it detrimental for us to have, not worry about the playground, but some grassed area in there at all to the intent of the redesign of Vine Plaza?
CEO, I'll refer this to your team.
I think I'd have to refer it to the director. Thanks.
Through the chair, yes, you're correct in the sense that the lawn, the grass area and the playground area are separate issues, because playground wouldn't go in a lawned area because you'd have to have softball. So if you're going to have a lawned area, the objective of Vine Plaza is to make it a very active place. At the moment, there's some big mature trees in the plaza. We struggle to get lawn to grow under those conditions. And the amount of traffic that we want and to activate the space, again, that would make it very hard for the lawn to grow. So in terms of technically getting the grass to survive, I think it's a very difficult question. We want to make it all access as well. Lawn areas don't make all access. People with prams, people with wheelchairs have some issues. In saying that, you can create paths around and that sort of thing. But again, it's going against the philosophy that we're working on in terms of creating a active, accessible area.
Thank you.
Thank you. No, that's fine. That's all.
Thank you. Any further debate? No? Councillor Barnett, do you wish to sum up?
No, thanks.
Okay, that concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? Is carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next item is item 10.1. Sorry, no, deputations, there are nil. Questions without notice, sorry. Questions without notice. Are there any Deputy Mayor?
Now I'm going to get to a question very quickly.
A warning there, is it?
Well, just in case you were planning on prompting me for the formation.
I have great faith, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much. I think the question will be ultimately to the director. The development at 60 Belford Avenue has caused a lot of consternation. There's been a lot of interaction between the owners and the residents there, and staff and also other stakeholders about the condition that they feel the building has been handed over in and is still in. So I can understand their concern, because it appears that they haven't got what they expected. So my question is, acknowledging that the team has spent a lot of time over the last 9 months working with the various stakeholders to try to do what we can do to help out, given that we are constrained because not a lot of it is within our power. Have we investigated all the avenues that are accessible to us to assist? And whereabouts are we in the process, just at a very high level?
Thank you. That's your question?
That's the question.
Okay, thank you, CEO.
Through you,
happy to go, Director.
Thank you, Chair.
Through the chair, and thanks for the question. As you noted, it's been a long process so far, essentially for the benefit of some in the room who haven't got the background. Some residents have moved into an apartment building and the outcome or finish has not met their expectation based on what plans they had seen and what contractual documents they'd signed. All of those expectations are valid. A lot of those expectations are not a planning matter. So we've been in discussions with the residents, the developer's lawyers, members of state parliament and others to talk through what we can do and what we would suggest the residents do. We've suggested that the residents seek their own legal advice in relation to potential contract dispute or breach of contract. So there's a number of matters that sit in that camp, which are essentially powerless to then pursue further. So our goal is then to deal with the building issues as part of the planning compliance process. I'm confident that my team has exhausted or has pursued all the avenues and is continuing to pursue a number of avenues to seek remedy. One of the most recent outcomes on this site is that there's the developer has seen or has recognised the need to lodge a variation application, which we have determined through my staff as to not be a minor variation, so it doesn't just get an automatic tick, it needs a proper assessment. There's some other complexities around this in that it was a state planning decision in the first instance through the state cap, and then some minor variations were authorised by the state staff rather than that same body. So there's some further confusion around that, which I think is adding to the worries of the residents in that the process feels convoluted and confusing in that they have a bucket of issues that they feel is one bucket and we're treating it as several. There's only so many we can deal with. But I guess in answer to your question, there are a number of avenues we can pursue and are pursuing, and since December 2019 we've been pursuing those, and currently we have an application before us for some variations. We're waiting on the applicant to pay the fees and then that will be processed. So that's the planning matter that we're still dealing with on our point of view. Our Building Fire Safety Committee is following up a number of things, so there are a number of elements still underway.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, any further questions with that notice?
No, that's
Okay. Are there any further questions with that notice from other members? Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I have a follow-up question from the question just asked, and it relates to the issues that you and your staff and us as elected members, the Mayor and I have been met with the residents concerned. But it goes to the fact we now have a new planning minister installed. And there has been a delay to the planning review, which I know Prospect Council has put in lots of responses. So my question is, should we be following up with these concerns as far as planning goes that this is an example of with the new planning minister?
CEO, thank you.
Through the chair, I think it's an obvious fair question, I think, to ask in that we have a new minister. Will we get a fair hearing or will it be within that minister's ambit to deal with? In thinking about the specific issues related to this matter, we're still currently working under the Development Act process. So the delays to the Planning and Design Code have no bearing because we're dealing with something that was approved under the current/old legislative framework. I wouldn't think, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the minister, but I wouldn't think that the minister would have the power or would want to be dealing with essentially a compliance issue from an approval under the Development Act, and would certainly prefer to stay in the space of what are the planning reforms, and the planning reforms are not process related to assist in this Health Avenue matter.
Thank you. Any further questions about notice? Councillor Rick.
Just wanted to double check when the stage 1 for Collinswood traffic management changes, when that's expected to come back to council, because obviously we supported the 12-month trial and I've just had some residents asking me when that's due back to council.
Thank you.
Through
See
you,
ya.
Chair, to the Director.
Director.
Through the chair, yes, you're correct, it's a 12-month trial, they went in December, so we're looking at bringing a report back in January. We're undertaking traffic analysis data now, though, in preparation for that before and after scenario, so January next year.
Just a follow-up, okay, thanks for that, Director. Also just wanted to check, because I'd have to find the email that I received, but I'm also led to believe that before obviously Pam left the council, she was working with Dip Tie on the Northeast Road and intersection of Galway about getting either the right-hand slip lane put in or getting that extension of that right-hand turn continued, but I haven't heard anything since. So I just wanted to check if we are, or if we haven't, if we can follow up with Dip Tie on that, because residents regularly raise that with me. They're happy, obviously, with the change. I've had really good feedback overall, but residents have raised with me that they want to see us continuing to push Dip Tie on, or Dip, sorry, now on that intersection and that right-hand signal.
Director, is there a status update on that?
Through the chair, I'm happy to chase it up.
Question. Any further questions without notice? Councillor Pearce.
Just follow on from Deputy Mayor's question earlier. We were getting I think it was a fortnightly report on uncompleted projects, which was quite informative. I don't think I've seen one for probably a month.
The question is, where is it at?
Yes, please.
We had CEO. Sorry, Chair, and through you.
Like Belford Avenue, etc.
Urban corridor development.
Yeah, but I don't think I've seen one for 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Through you, Chair, to the Director, primarily in the infrastructure area, or? Sorry. Oh, I see. Sorry, development. My apologies. Sorry.
Yeah.
Through the chair, for about 18 months, we've been providing essentially a fortnightly update on compliance and enforcement updates. So it does straddle the two departments.
Right.
Essentially, there's two columns that are updated for the 40 or so developments that are under construction in the urban corridors across the city. We've talked about reducing the cycle of that down to monthly, but we haven't moved on that. So I'll check when the most recent distribution was, but I'd be very surprised if it wasn't in the first week of September.
Okay, thank you. We'll chase it up.
Yeah, sure.
Further questions without notice? If not, we'll move on to reports for decision. Item 10.1, review and update to existing policy recommendations on page 7. Somebody happy to move it in its current form? I'll ask again. Somebody happy to move it as per the agenda? Councillor Groot, do you wish to speak to it?
I'll reserve my right at this point.
Well,
To the end.
yeah.
That's the last.
Just so, because we've got a bit of time, this reserve my right thing is kind of technically not quite correct. You have a right to speak in something.
That's right. I haven't heard a point of order though, so.
Yeah. Anyway, all right. Do I have a second? Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to it?
I will speak to it very briefly. I believe that the update to this policy is in order to bring it in line with legislation. So it seems like a good idea to me.
Okay, thank you. Do I have any other speakers?
Just
Councillor Harris?
mine's more a question. When I read through it, is it based, so the question comes, is it basically taken a lot out of it and shifting it into some other act of the government? Particularly I'm thinking about vegetation stuff. So this, all the stuff that I think is important that have got a red line through it are going to be somewhere else.
I think, is that your question?
Yeah.
The answer I've been given is it's already somewhere else, but I'll ask the CEO to clarify.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That's exactly correct. We're simply taking it out because it's now dealt with by another statute, but it all applies and we can use the same powers.
Okay, then one quick more one, but thank you for that. The one place then I think it's shifted to is something about where they just last year or the year before that included the noise and all these things. Is there a cost difference then if we do things under this existing one as to opposed? So if we're going to shift vegetation on people's houses, cutting it off and all that, which we can do under this, and we shift it to the other one, is it an extra cost to us or a cost we put to someone?
CEO, through you, Chair, to the Director, not that we're aware of, I believe. Director.
Through the chair, I'm not aware of the specific cost. The team has talked about what does the Litter and Nuisance Control Act cost us. We haven't actually had very specific costing. In terms of the work, it's already detailed in the legislation about vegetation, about animal, about clearing of land, etc. So it's detailed in there. This policy simply tidy up our policy to reflect correctly.
Okay.
And just further to that answer, the briefing I've been given is that we no longer have these powers in the policy because that section of the Act has been deleted. But the powers are given to us in another Act. So our policy is not kept up with the two Acts. So we have to tidy that up. So it's procedural.
Yeah, okay.
That's the briefing I've been given. I'm getting some nods. Is there any further debate? Councillor Groot, would you like to use your right to sum up?
Look, I think enough has been said, Mayor.
Speech.
Amend the motion to the floor.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Item 10.2, Local Government Association election for President for 2020 to 2022. Recommendations on page 21. Given that there's 3 candidates, we probably would benefit from some discussion. I propose suspending meeting procedures for maybe 20 minutes, say to 8 p.m. If we need it. We can always come back earlier. I just need to seek leave of the meeting for that. All those in favour? Against is carried and then thus suspended. Now, in previous times, just to remind old and let the newer ones know, we would have a discussion in the entirety of not just President, but the entirety of the board members. Board members is now done by the GAYROC, SAYROC process, which is the next item. This is just for President. So it's divided up this time. We've got 3 candidates, and by further way of background, this association in South Australia requires it to be a metropolitan representative for 2 years, and then it must be a regional representative for 2 years. And then it must go back to a metro for 2 years. It doesn't say it can't be the same person that goes every second cycle, but it has to change to a metro or a country. So that's why there is an election and why it has to be a metro and why there's only a certain number of people who can put their hand up for this. There being 3 candidates before us. You've got the information we've received has all been provided. I think I've tried hard to give you any other information that's come through. So I think some discussion would be good. Who has any questions or someone might wish to make a comment? Ultimately, if we resolve a consensus position in discussion, I'll ask someone to move that way. If we don't have consensus, then we've got ballot papers ready to have a ballot on this and the other items tonight. So we've got options there. Okay, over to you. Christina.
Yes. Usually with City of Prospect, historically, we've sort of leaned towards supporting councils or the representatives that are in our eastern region of councils. I don't know if we're still so inclined to continue to do that. So could we just have a rundown of the 3 candidates which are in the eastern region of councils?
Sorry, technically this is President, not for the regions.
Yes, I understand that.
Of the 3 candidates, Mayor Redmond is in the Mayor of Gawler, and that is in the new Northern region. Mayor Angela Evans is from Charles Sturt, that is in the new Western region. Mayor Jean-Claire Wisdom is the Adelaide Hills Council, which has been added to the Eastern region. They are, in addition to the members of the Eastern Region Alliance, of which we've been a member for a long time, 12 years, and because they're deemed a metropolitan council, they have some on the plains and some on the hills, but that's been the definition for a long time. They were seen not as being similar to the north, the west and the south, but to the east in terms of proximity. So in answer to your question, are there any eastern candidates? Yes, but there is kind of a distinction in that that's a recent addition to the region and probably only because of proximity. Sorry, that's probably an inadequate answer.
No, I understand. I mean, I was just sort of, it's really been a bit of, as I said before, a historical sort of thing, and whether we're still way, because you know, the three candidates all have different strengths and opportunities
Yes.
as well. So I am interested in ones that are likely to pursue things that are environmental and protecting our heritage. So that would be the top of my agenda.
Yep. Other comments? Questions? Alan?
Until Christina raised that, I didn't realise the other part was in the eastern, although I think they most probably line more with just Burnside. I was looking at the middle one, particularly because it's Charles III in being closer to us, you know, they're having similar sort of things. So that's not going to sway anyone. I'm just putting that on the table. That was my first thought when I come here. You know, why the Adelaide Hills one's thrown me out a bit now, but looking at the Gawler one, that's good. You know, if we get back one day on the Murray-Darling Association or something, we can do things. But in the meantime, I was looking at a council that's close to our heart. Well, close to our body,
Water.
not so much our heart.
Yep, that's good comments. Yep. Any others? Any other questions?
What was the size of the Adelaide Hills Council? Are they similar to us?
Bigger. Slightly larger, I think, but I don't think they're 40,000. I think they're 20s, I think.
Probably having someone, I don't know, I actually think all three would be equally in their own right good. And I think all three bring different experiences, but I think potentially I was like at first glance leaning towards the Adelaide Hills one, just based on size of the council and issues and whether that would, but again, that's all three would be fine. I think we'd be pretty safe with all three.
Just to further that point, Gawler is very similar size in people to City of Prospect.
Sorry, Gawler as well, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but they,
Charles Sturt's obviously massive. That's one of the biggest.
Charles Sturt is about 5 times or a bit more our size in people and geographic area. Adelaide Hills is 38,000, sorry, so closer to 40.
What would Gawler's?
Gawler's in the low 20s.
See, again, they'd probably be then the most linked.
Just to try and paint a picture around those three of the bid that I know, and I'm sure you've got your own perceptions. Adelaide Hills picks up what was the East Torrens Council. So currently the subject of a boundary change application by Campbelltown to pick up bits of Ross Trevor and Skye and Top of McGill Road, which is on the kind of the Adelaide Plains butting up to the hills. That's part of the East Torrens Council, which was combined with Stirling Council, I think, from memory, and one other to form Adelaide Hills. So they've got a bit of plains, but they're mostly hills. Gawler's got the township of Gawler, we all know, but also within that suburbs like Evanston Gardens, then new developments like Gawler East and some other hinterland developments, and then a lot of rural, semi-rural hobby farm stuff that's quite large, and a couple of rivers. Charles Sturt, I think you know pretty well, got a lot of beachfront, a lot of suburbia, a lot of western suburbs, and the relatively new St Clair development kind of in the middle between Woodville Road and Cheltenham Parade in that area there, the old racecourse site. So they've got quite a mix of things going on and some water courses.
On our border.
And on our border, Ovingham, the other bit, the non-prospect bit of Ovingham is in Charles Sturt for some strange reason, I don't know why.
I reckon, maybe either Adelaide Hills Gawler, just based on just size population, but
That's 2.
Yeah.
Any other comments, and we might go around again if we need to do that.
I was just leaning towards Mayor Angela Evans because we're closest to her to that CDM borderline as well. So neighbours.
Yes, certainly neighbours. Mark.
I think from my perspective, I'm probably less interested about size of council. I'm more interested in the influence that this person can have within government, because that's probably important from a sector point of view. So I'm not sure what that answer is, but they're all three of them. I'd be interested in other people's kind of feedback as to who could actually be a good advocate for us, because really you come onto this board, and you leave behind your council politics, and you're representing the overall local government family more so than anything else. So I'm kind of more interested in who can manage that, who can manage the public profile, who can manage, you know, a new planning minister who this person is going to have to deal with on a regular basis, I suspect, over the next 12 months. And I'd be interested in any commentary. I know one of them, I don't know the other two, but interested in any commentary about who can perhaps do that best, as opposed to similarities to councils. I'm very less interested in that from my perspective. Yeah.
Okay. It's kind of hard to know how to deal with that because we don't see these people in action per se because they're acting on behalf of their councils. In terms of, and I think you can work out what profile they've got and what they've achieved kind of anecdotally, and you have to read what they tell us they've done. What I can add to that is, and it's in their submissions, Mayor Redmond has been the chair of Garrock and therefore has had some exposure, but mainly reporting to board and LGA because the rep for the LGA is the president, not the Garrock chair. So I haven't seen her in direct negotiations with ministers or in an arm wrestle or anything like that. Neither have I, Angela Evans. And I think you've read in the submission from Jean-Claire Wisdom, her negotiations around bushfire relief for the hills, where she has been in direct negotiation, and I'm aware of some of her interactions federally. But you'll notice in her letter it says she's still pursuing those outcomes. So I'm not able to confirm that she's actually hit the home runs on those things.
Bushfires is ongoing too.
It's very difficult territory, all of that. So I'm not able to give you a definitive answer on that.
No, that's been helpful.
Comments? Any other comments, questions? Christina?
Are we going to have a secret ballot?
We can, if people want, we can certainly do that. So we'll just take a few more questions and comments, and if we don't have a consensus, then that's exactly what we should do. Yeah. Anyone else?
Just good food.
Similarly, I only know one of these people, so it's just a difficult decision. So I think we should just go for a vote, because we're just going to be procrastinating over who we want to pick on it. It's got to get harder when we get down to the other two, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, they're all good.
Potentially.
Oh, three. But
Easy, that one.
Matt? I won't be here.
I'd be in favour of Mayor Angela Evans, but if the consensus is we should go for a vote, then have the support a vote. But I think that makes it good. They're all good candidates. Thinking about it's taking the council hat off and putting the industry hat on. I think that'll be reasonable. So yeah, I'd be happy to go to a vote if we want to do it that way, just to move things along.
Okay. Any other questions, comments?
Can I just ask a question then? Because there's three people and you only want one person, and I'm going to vote for the Charles Durr one. I thought I don't worry about secrecy. But so do we go? Well, look, if I'm going to say something, I'll say it. But if we go down, so the person that comes last, then that comes off, and then you do it again, isn't it? That's
it's first past the post, as I understand. So CEO, just to clarify the process.
I'm just clarifying what the.
It's okay. Is that correct? And if we have a draw for the last two, does it matter? It's only a draw if there's first and second. It's a draw, is it? Yeah. So no, we don't eliminate. We go
7.
But 1x.
Well,
with it.
Oh, 8. Yeah.
Can we do an informal, like show of hands? We might have consensus. I think we will, rather than not going to a secret ballot.
Well, I've heard a number of people say they're comfortable with Charles Sturt due to proximity and other reasons. Sure, if people want to just indicate that way, or there's 4. I'm happy to have a ballot. If people want to do a ballot, we will do a ballot. Will that make people more comfortable?
I know 3, so I'm,
Okay, let's do a ballot. Unless there's any other questions, comments. No, let's do a ballot.
Chair.
So just put a cross in one box. There's no preferential voting. Don't confuse the returning officer, who is Jazz, by making it complex.
Does it have to be across?
Actually, no.
Smiley face?
I have said before, it can be any mark, provided we know which one you are choosing.
Watch out, you know. Thanks.
Grab a fingerprint there or a blob.
Oh, you got to fold it there.
Yes.
Do you need scrutiny?
Ginny is the scrutineer.
What else are you looking at?
When did you fill out?
Oh, just 10. Oh, just trying to figure out who the missing ballot was in
Sanitize that, I reckon, in March.
2018.
Where were you stuck
Nothing.
before?
Where was I? Yes. It's a good pen.
So she'll bring that back next week.
Well, we'll just tally that up, members, because the next item I won't be in the chair, so we'll just wait a couple of minutes. It won't take long to tally that up.
That often you
Then I'll ask for some. I'll come out of. We'll go back into the procedures. Sorry,
often you're not in the chair.
and thank you. And I'll ask someone to move the way of the result, and then of course it becomes a debate. If someone wants to challenge it, of course you can do that as an amendment, but generally someone moves it and you move on.
Would you come back after?
It is my birthday, so
I know, that's why.
luckily, Alan, there's no pub along here, so my options on a Tuesday night are very limited.
I asked him where he was celebrating his 40th birthday, but he didn't have any plans apparently to celebrate the milestone.
We just celebrate our 40th at our house in Northern Prospect with a huge party, and then had our first open inspection to sell it 3 days later. That was a stupid idea.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. I was there.
You invited.
You can invite Alan.
It was a very good party.
You make a note of that.
Declare
I
that.
think I was there for other reasons.
We were out there the next day with tweezers standing the grass blades up. Oil to get the sun on them. The result, the CEO informs me, is Angela Evans received the most votes. I now pull us back into a formal. Sorry, councillors. Sorry, that was important. The CEO just announced that Angela Evans won that ballot. So now I'll pull us back into formal session and ask if someone wishes to move that way. Councillor Harris, you're moving that with Angela Evans put in as part 2 on the screen. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Nguyen, do you wish to speak to it? Any further debate? I won't go back to Councillor Harris. Do you wish to sum up what's not been said?
Yes, thank you.
That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Thank you. All right, next item is item 10.3. As I said at the start, I've got a conflict of interest, and now hand the chair to the Deputy Mayor. I need to move out of earshot because the doors are open. So I'll be.
Do you want to take my car down the car wash?
I can go in the offices, can't I? I've got a pass. Better because downstairs, you go a long way downstairs to get.
I'll borrow your pen. Yeah.
Oh, has it been sterilised?
Sanitizing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we're going to do what we just did then mostly,
This way.
but there are a couple of differences in the sense that we have 2 people to elect rather than 1. So just to go through the procedure, I would like to seek leave to
I thought you were ready to move, that's all. I was going to give 2 suggestions.
Seeking leave.
Oh, no, we've got to seek leave to.
Discuss.
Oh, right, okay. Apologise, sir.
That's okay. I'll note that you were very keen to talk on the subject. So I would like to seek leave to suspend the meeting procedures for, say, 30 minutes, should we need to. If we don't need that much time, we can come back in a session earlier. All those in favour? 2/3 majority achieved. Thank you. So 7:55, suspend meeting procedures until 8:25. This is already up on that. Look at that, how efficient. Awesome. All right, so we are looking for 2 people to be elected to the Eastern Regional Group representative, so Garrick or Garrock, however you pronounce it. I guess I can ask, questions. Councillor Harris.
I was going to put up 2 names quickly. One is a bloke, David O'Loughlin. Whether support him or not, he's our mayor. I think we should put him there. And the other one, similar to the previous discussion we had, is the town of Walkerville, Ms. Fricker. Simply because it's here and there's a lot of things that Collingwood and various areas we should be trying to work with that it most probably assist us. So that's my reason. David's our mayor, so it'd be a bit rude not to put him there or suggest it. The other one is the closest person there, particularly out of the whole lot, to work with us.
So just because I've practiced this, I'm just going to go through my dot points and just explain the way I'm going to run this. So, but thanks for that. First of all, we need 2 candidates, and I thought we would see whether there is one candidate for start that we could all agree on. If we can, then that's great. We can tick that box, and then through the same process, if there are 2 candidates that we can all agree on, then we can put those forward. But if we can't agree on any candidates as a group, either 1 or 2, then we will go to a ballot. If we do go to a ballot and we have agreed on one candidate, then we'll cross that person off the ballot paper and we'll just be voting for one other candidate. If we can't agree on one candidate, then there'll be the option to put 2 crosses on the voting paper, and then we'll get it tallied up, and then we'll see what the outcome is. So kicking off, Councillor Harris has mentioned that he's in support of the Mayor, David O'Loughlin, and also Mayor Fricker. Is there, just let's go around the table, is there anybody else who we're happy to agree on without having to go to a vote? So I'll go in order that I saw people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Sorry to rain on your parade a bit, but I actually agree with Councillor Harris. My thoughts were the Mayor and our Mayor and also the Mayor of Walkerville.
Yeah.
I just think with these things that my personal preference is that a ballot's conducted, but I don't know how others feel, but I do believe that a secret ballot should be conducted on the whole thing. That's just my view. Sorry to rain on what you've just...
I've said that if we need to go to a secret ballot, then more than...
I understand that. But yeah, look, for me, those 2 obviously seem like the obvious choice, but I do feel the ballot would be preferred.
Yep. So
yes, I'm the same mind, having read them all, and I know all the candidates again, and but I'm just thinking that I think we, part and parcel of this is that getting a good, closer working relationship with the town of Walkerville, certainly in some areas that there are possibly areas that they need to work more closely with them. So I'd be quite happy in supporting our mayor. He's got lots of experience that we can still continue to use. And also for our closest neighbour, town of Walkerville, I think it would be advantageous perhaps to go that way. So that's my reasoning.
Thanks, Councillor Barnett. So we'll go around the table, but then I will ask if we feel the need to go to a secret ballot, then we certainly can. I think it was Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, look, as with the previous election, I only know one of these nominees, and we know who that is. So I'm naturally happy for David to go straight in. The others are all good candidates again, so I'm happy to go to a secret ballot if you wish for the second person.
Yeah, no worries. Former Deputy Mayor Greg.
Thank you. Happy to support Mayor O'Loughlin for the first ballot, for the first position rather. The second one, I would like to go to secret ballot. I would encourage people to think, again, not necessarily along sort of lines of who's our neighbours, but again, who's going to make the best contribution, which may be from the town of Walkerville, but thinking about what the role of this group is, who's going to give us the best representation, the best voices, the best advocacy for people in our area. So, but in order to do that, I think we should go to secret ballot for the second position.
All right, so Councillor Nguyen.
Yeah, I'm happy to go with Mayor O'Loughlin for the first preference. If we want to, yeah, happy to go with the ballot as a secret ballot for the second position.
Okay, so my position is I'm happy to support the mayor and happy to go to a secret ballot on the second one. So I'll just ask once more, given that everyone's indicated that they'd be happy to support the mayor, are we all happy to put the mayor's name forward and then go to a secret ballot for the second name? Okay, thank you. So,
Okay. Oh, Jimmy's got. So through you, Chair, it's one cross.
one cross, yeah. So we'll cross out,
We'll cross out the
mayor's name, and then it's one cross on another name, and then that's the
smiley face.
So the notice you've got up there, is it important who's first and who's second on that? Because does this sort of vote go to a whole lot of other people?
My understanding through you, Chair, is no, simply we'll be putting up two candidates. You've got one already. And it's a question of the second one. It's one cross on the name you prefer.
When it goes back to formally.
I think Councillor House was talking about the order that they appear in the minutes.
No, my understanding that doesn't count.
Doesn't indicate either way. It's just these were the two who were.
I can't cross out David's because mine's already got a regular.
They've already done it.
Oh, so quick.
They're sharp here. They don't muck around.
I've got a purple pen.
So I just like smaller councils to have a bit more of a representation. Forgot to mention that.
I think Walkerville and Collinswood and what we're going to do. I think it's better than me.
So gender balance, I hope, as well.
I know this is not the right one.
Finance Authority. That's the next one, isn't it? We're going to do two for the next one as well.
That one.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Another one we want to do.
Yes, that's the finance. So I went through them.
Two positions, that's right.
Yep. Okay. Okay. So we will talk very slowly. Sorry. That's all right. No worries. So the CEO has passed on that Mayor Fricker from the City of Walkerville has received the most nominations. So we'll now second name on the recommendations at this point in time, as the Mayor mentioned before. Once we come back in a session and we look to vote on this motion, then we could see an amendment, and that's the option open to us. So, all right. So I would now like to pull us back into session at 8:03, and I would like to ask for someone, ask if someone would like to move this motion. Councillor Ripp.
Yep. I'll briefly say I think the proposed people will be excellent.
I'm supposed to say, would you like to speak to this motion?
Oh, thank you. Would love to. No, look, obviously,
Would you like to speak to this motion?
thank you. Would love to. Thank you so much. The Deputy Mayor, is it? Yeah. Look, happy with obviously who we've put up, and I think having City of Prospect and City of Walkerville working together will be a good thing. And we have projects that do impact both council areas. And yeah, having the two working together there, I think would be hopefully a good outcome.
Thank you. I'd like to now call for a seconder. Is that right? You want to second the motion? Yep. Councillor Nguyen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah. Congratulations to Mayor O'Loughlin and Mayor Fricker. Hope they do well and represent us.
Should they get voted in? Is there any further debate around the table? Okay, as there's no further debate, Councillor Ripp, would you like to summarise?
Oh, look, I could reserve my right, but I won't. No, that's fine. Put it to the vote.
Yeah, okay, so I'd like to put this motion to a vote. All those in favour? Do I vote? Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
Okay. So can I just say that again? Okay, so that's unanimous. So carried, Mayor O'Loughlin and Mayor.
Getting from the cafe wherever you
You're just getting it out of you.
Wow.
I know what you're doing.
I'll listen to him. Wow.
I don't know.
Councils for 20 years, but it's going to be harder to pick.
Oh, that's fine.
I don't know. It's going to be difficult. Well, I suppose she's going to tick up the numbers again. Right? They're all got degrees in finance and commerce, but those two people have been filling through the years here. This one's been on 6 years.
If he doesn't return in 3 minutes, we move on.
21.
I'm sure the deputy mayor. I'm sure the deputy mayor would happily take over for the rest of the meeting.
That is someone else's point of order at some point in time.
I was going to, but,
You know,
I'd like to see a rescission.
but we gave the mayor ample time to return.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
For the meeting.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. I understand Mayor Fricker is our second candidate. Is that correct? She'll be very, very pleased. She's very keen. We get along very well. We'll see what happens with the vote. I have to say that is the most candidates I've ever seen from the East running for these positions, even board. It's really interesting that I have, I'm sorry, I'm speaking a bit out of turn. I've pushed very hard to regionalise the metropolitan area. This is the first time ever there's been elections on a regional basis. The East has always been overrepresented on the board. We've normally had up to 4 of the 18, or no, 4 of the 11 and more of the 18. And this time, when you think there's only 2 candidates for the East, that it would go down. It's the most I've ever seen. So I think it's a good sign of a healthy perception of the LGA. It's great. 10.4, Local Government Finance Authority SA Board of Trustees election. Recommendations on page 64. We need to populate the recommendations. So again, I recommend we suspend meeting procedures until 8:30 should we need it. All those in support to suspend. It's thus suspended until 8:30. Unlike the previous 2, I'll just start off the batting. We don't have a lot of information on people here. And I'm afraid I don't know a lot about these people. So I'm actually not able to add a lot of value. I suspect we're going to have a ballot just simply to sort it out because there's such a lot of candidates. And I have been thinking about this a lot in terms of how to work through it. And I'm at a bit of a loss. Apart from Michael Sedgman, who's been on it, and I've heard nothing bad about him being on it, which generally implies that that's pretty good. Mary Kouros is a citizen of Prospect, which is a member of the City of Adelaide. Michael Rabbit is a well-known long-serving member of the City of Unley. And the others, Charles Mansueto, I've met a couple of times. I think I've met a couple of the others, but really I don't have any further information other than what you're reading. Robin.
I agree with what you said. Michael Sedgman was currently on there, and so also was Annette Martin.
Sorry, yes, thank you, Annette Martin. Yep.
And both have got over 20 years experience in local government. So, I mean, I again, like you, I haven't heard of whether they've done a good job or not. So it's a hard one again.
The biggest revolution recently for the LGFA is that they have not renewed the contract of the long-serving CEO, and they have gone for another CEO, and that CEO has a broader attitude to variable rates and has offered the assistance package of lower interest to councillors based on our turnover, so to speak, which we are taking advantage of to the tune of about 2.75 million, I think. 2.5 million at a lower interest rate. I've never heard of that being done before. And I'm really pleased to announce the LGFA have tipped in $350,000 to fund the LGA's emergency response task force. There is another term for it, but that's what it is, which is a gap in the subscription base, how to work out how to fund it. So I've never heard of them doing that before. So we can attribute that to the new CEO, but really you'd want to attribute that to the board that's made those 3 things happen. It's been a remarkable last 18 months in the LGFA. Christina.
Yes, I'm just wondering, do we have any information regarding the totality of the board for the LGFA, I haven't checked, but I'm assuming that it's very heavily towards perhaps LGA staff, if that's any evidence of those that have nominated. I'm just wondering where there is some balance between those with the qualifications and possibly local government experience, but as an elected member.
Okay, good question. So I've just looked up the website, which if you've got your iPads, you can do. The board at the moment is Mr. John Comrie, who was here last workshop.
Yes.
Financial consultant, former CEO of councils and highly regarded. Dr. Andrew Johnson, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the LGA SA Mutual body and also an Executive Director for LGA. So he is an LGA staffer. Again, highly regarded. Former CEO of Port Pirie. I have to say he's really excelled in his role at the LGA in procedural matters, writing a whole pile of policy that was a gap before, stuff that drives me nuts, but he's done it very well. Very good strategic thinker. Matt Pinniger, who of course is the CEO of the LGA, is another board appointee. I'm not sure he's a mandatory one, but he might be because he's a CEO. Michael Sedgman, of course, Annette Martin. Michael Sedgman is the CEO of the Rural City of Murray Bridge, just to remind you. Annette Martin is a manager of financial services at Charles Sturt. And Heather Watts is the only other board member. She's an appointee of the State Treasurer, and she works within the SA Government Financing Authority, or SAFA. So the LGFA was set up. The government provides a guarantee, which we local government people pay for. Costs us a lot of money. But as part of that guarantee, the government said we must have a board member. So and she's the current one.
So, because that means then that we've got 1, 2, 3 out of the nominations for 5 that are elected, actually serving elected members. So I sort of did my own little sort of working out, just, sussing out, going from experience and qualifications, and then whether they're serving or elected member or staff. So I did come up with perhaps Councillor Karen Hockley, who's got, I think, quite a good array of the necessary qualifications, and she's an elected member for 6 years. Apart from that, that's about my only way I've been thinking at the moment.
So what you're pointing out is that there's no elected member on the board at the moment.
Yes.
That's quite right. Yes.
I mean, we need them with the qualifications, so that's essential. So very few qualifications, a little council experience. One of the ones at the top. Another one has qualifications down the bottom, but I've just been an elected member for 2 years. So, I'm just sort of teasing that out.
Way to work through it? Sure, yep. Anyone else done that sort of thinking, analysis?
I mean, I'm sort of having a look at Karen's qualifications. They're pretty impressive too in the length of time, so that could be one to look at. But yeah, I don't really know any of the others. It's hard.
Anyone else?
How many have we got to pick?
2.
2 out of 9.
Suggesting the one we've just been talking about.
Any other suggestions than that one?
The only person I know in there is Charles Mansueto. He's currently GM at City of Salisbury. But the others I have no relationship and don't know. I mean, I think I agree with Councillor Barnett having an elected member on that board brings a different flavour to it. I'll consider that.
Yep. So if we look at Karen Hockley's little sheet there, she's City of Mitcham on the Eastern Waste Management Authority. A few roles on that. Murray-Darling Basin Authority. That's not a huge burden. And Blackwood, they're past roles, sorry, Eastern Waste past role. Past City of Mitcham committees, but still an elected member of the City of Mitcham. And presently, Blackwood Rec Centre and Centennial Park Cemetery Authority Board, which is a reasonable size enterprise that Mitcham and Unley own, I think. Is that?
Yeah, the two
councils own it. So they have to provide board members to it. Ned Martin, of course, has a lot of qualifications there in terms of past and current roles due to their profession. Michael Sedgman similarly. In terms of elected members, if we went down Christina's path, in terms of you looking at the strongest elected member profile, Christina, I presume?
Yes, in qualifications, sort of,
Yes.
firstly. Yeah.
Michael Rabbit is on a whole pile of internal council committees and past and currently on a couple more, and on the Centennial Park board as well. The others are consultants or CEOs or general managers. Peter Field is only on internal council committees. Mary Kouros is on the Adelaide Convention Bureau and on the Australia 3-day event, which are now the Australian 3-day event might require a council rep on it because it's in the parklands and she may be council's appointee to it. And the Adelaide Convention Bureau, I don't know. She may be entirely independent on that from council.
I didn't think she had many, less qualifications in the finance and economic area, I think.
It's really, the information is really thin on the ground, isn't it?
Yes.
It's very difficult. We have made this point before, and I'll need to make it again. Okay, do we need to have a ballot?
I think so.
Okay, CEO?
Thank you. We'll organise that, Chair.
It's first past the post again, so simply put a cross or mark or paw print or some way of us knowing which one of the names you are selecting.
Two.
Which two of the names you are selecting, sorry.
For review.
Yeah.
Like the one up in Brisbane.
Done that? Which two you are selecting?
No video camera.
I've umpired with an umpire though that called for a score review, even though we don't have them. That's good fun.
Where's that?
You are a. You've got one?
Sorry to be so offensive. Digital first, I say. We should have a digital voting paper here.
Pass it on to the CEO. I don't think he said that.
We do.
You can interpret it that way.
Imagine if this one was preferential. We'd be having a lot of. We'd be getting a lot of.
Yeah, that's why it's not.
And that's the end of the first count back.
We had a councillor here elected on the 121st count. We had no awards. That was the most we've had, I think. That was
21. Christie.
Councillor Karahalios. Pretty sure.
Sorry, what was the
21 counts.
Yeah.
How was that many?
Because there was no award, so it was first 8.
With it,
Took ages to eliminate to get back up to the.
I thought there was only one election with no awards. Was it two?
Yeah.
There was a whole council and then there was a
And-
by-election.
Ashley and Rebecca, they were, I
Oh,
don't know how
yes.
many numbers, but they were the two there.
That went down to Lord knows however.
I thought we only had one election.
So of all
That's
the
the one
other,
that I came in on.
so in the history of Prospect, so they've all been
And
pretty well.
and she didn't get through.
In 1872, they had a vote, but one bloke died halfway through. Water run over him.
Halfway through the counting or the,
On the way down to put his ballot in. Actually, I better tell you that was a fib.
well, but that has happened, of course, because
Yes.
for disabled people, Nikki,
Yeah.
Kelly Vincent.
Kelly Vincent, not Nikki, Kelly Vincent, she got elected because the first person on the ticket died.
Halfway through.
Yeah.
We had to change our local government rules or act because of the death of one person, and because then, so they changed it so that you could go a longer length of time or they changed their length.
Oh, before the next election.
Yes, yeah,
9 months.
yeah. Oh,
Reforms are trying to take it to 12 months too.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
very expensive.
yeah, yeah.
Well, while we're voting, I'll just tell you I'm feeling all right. I'm not going to drop dead.
Can you hold it up until 12 months? Okay, the two of the highest votes are Karen Hockley and Annette Martin. So, no questions about that? Good. I'll now pull us back into formal session and ask if somebody wishes to move that way, including those names at part 2. Karen Hockley and Annette Martin, as they appear on the ballot paper. I have no idea who was first and second, doesn't matter. Moved by Councillor Groot.
Karen.
To speak to it? Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, I saw at the corner of my eye first. Do you wish to speak to it, Deputy Mayor?
No, thanks.
Any further debate? There being no further debate, debate is concluded. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, 10.5 Elector Representation Review 2020-2021 recommendations, page 85. Somebody happy to move it in its current form? Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to it?
I reserve my right.
No, you can't reserve your right.
Not at this stage. I'm looking forward to hearing the debate around the table, and then I'll summarise if I say the need to.
Thank you so much. Right, I used to get it at AGMs. I reserve my right. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Groot, do you wish to speak to it as seconder?
Yeah, I will because I'm unable to reserve my right. So I do recall our last representation review, which seemed like it was only yesterday, but ago. So I've just got a question, which I know the answer to, but I'm going to ask it anyway. But it feels like 8 weeks. I presume we have to do this. So the question for the CEO is there any way around that? Is there any appropriate mechanism that means we don't have to do this?
Through you, Chair, no, we are obliged by legislation to do one of these every 8 years, as you pointed out.
We have to do it.
The only thing I can add to that is the reforms we've considered to the Act are proposing to allow us not to, unless there are population changes within wards beyond the reasonable limit.
Yeah.
So going forward, not mandatory. Currently, mandatory.
So on the basis of that, given that we've got a year's window to do this, would we not be better off waiting a little longer till we commence it, or does it have to be completed within that time frame? Which means, because I thought the time frame was extraordinarily long for a representation review.
Sorry, can I just clarify your question? You're assuming the reforms will get up and within a quick period of time.
Well, I would never assume that, but I'm assuming there is a greater chance if we delay this that the reforms could get up in a short period of time, or at least prior to us requiring the start of the representation.
CEO, well, through you, Chair, to the Director.
Through the Chair, the Local Government Act says that as long as the Minister has gazetted the review, we will need to carry out the review. So the Minister has actually gazetted the review in August, and our time frame for prospect is October to October.
So we have to,
In the process, councillor.
so to begin the process between October and October or complete it?
Completed by October 2020.
Sorry, directed, completed by October next year.
Correct.
The CEO, back to the question, how long could we delay it?
Well, Chair, we'd have to make sure that we can complete it by October 21. So that means we'd have to, we may be able to delay it in the meantime, but one assumes that we'd have to allow enough time to complete it. Through you, Chair, to the Director, she just wants to add a comment. Sorry, Director?
Through the Chair, the Electoral Commission has actually estimated the process to be a 42-week process when you look at consultation, etc. So as long as we finish by October 2021, that is the requirement.
42 weeks being 10 weeks shy of a year, so 9.5 months.
Couldn't delay it by much, Chair.
So we could delay it until halfway through January, which would mean a December council meeting to initiate it. Is that quick calculation correct?
I think it's quite quick.
Yeah.
Is there the maths right?
Yeah.
Resident mathematician director?
Through the Chair, the 42 weeks is only an estimate, but that is an estimate provided by Electoral Commission. Is it 40 weeks? Is it 42 weeks? Is it shorter? But that is just an estimate of.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, in answer to your question, December probably to make sure, January possible, but we're slightly under 42 weeks.
And just bear in mind those 42 weeks, it does say in the pro forma provided to us by, I presume, a lawyer, that the consultation, the second consultation is minimum 3 weeks, but our council consultation policy requires 4 to 6 weeks. So we're already out of sync with what the 42 weeks. So it's actually not 42 weeks, it's really 43 to 46 weeks, just on that basis. That being said, the process allows 12 weeks to prepare the options paper. 12 weeks. So this is based on a panel who's doing this for every other council. I'm astounded it's going to take 12 weeks for them to prepare that. Given we're a small council, we did it 8 years ago. We're fairly straightforward. I don't think there's a lot of controversy. There's been no sort of push to either get rid of wards or to create an extra ward or to create area aldermen or area councillors. So I feel this is a much more straightforward process than it might have been 8 years ago. I'm just confused that we don't have the right number of weeks. 42, it's actually 46, but 12 weeks to prepare a paper seems a little bit absurd. The other question I've got is just, and I couldn't find in here, but that is one about cost, what the cost is for this. Given that we're now using a tender process, can I ask the cost of the representation?
You would you like to?
I would like to, please. Yeah. What is the cost?
Oh, CEO.
As you know, we went out to tender and we ran a waiting process. Normal Waterhouse won the tender on $8,000.
Oh, that'll.
And the highest one, I think, was through you, Chair, to the Director, I think was up around 18,000.
Okay, that's not much.
We see this as a very straightforward process, and I think that's reflected in the cost that we would like to accept. Just at the end of the day, it is something that councillors are obliged to do. We were attracted to a low price because we think it is straightforward.
Councillor Groot, you probably still have a minute left if you need it.
So look, all I'd say is I'm unable to move an amendment because I foolishly seconded the motion. Thank you, Mayor. But I would encourage others maybe to think about delaying the commencement of the representation review to the new year and also work on that 3-month period of preparing the paper and adjusting to the accurate amount of time that's required for consultation as per our policy. I still think with those ons and offs, we could probably start in the new year and maybe have some opportunity in other processes that happen beyond our council where the reformers might suggest we don't have to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Barnett.
Yes, I'm quite happy with the as before us. I just want to check that given that there may be new legislation, but who knows what will happen there, we've got a crystal ball. So my question is it likely to be another 8 years before we have to do this?
Sorry, I'm just under the current legislation, it's every 8 year, sorry, it's an 8-year maximum. If the legislation doesn't change, we need to complete this one by the end of 2021 and another one by 2029, presumably. If legislation does change, CEO, I just don't have a clear memory exactly.
Sure, through you, Chair, to the Director, are we aware what the new legislation is saying?
Through the chair, I'm not sure.
Okay, so my recollection is, as I just stated before, is that you're not obliged to, in other words, you respond to community sentiment, unless your ward populations get out of whack, which could possibly happen to us if 250 Churchill Road goes to much higher density in subsequent stages. Other than that, I can't see how it would happen, but it's there for cities like Onkaparinga and Playford and other fringe ones where a whole new paddock might be turned into 1,000 people.
Yeah.
That's my understanding of the proposals. So again, sorry, long answer to your question. Current legislation, 2021, 2029 max. New legislation from memory, maybe never. Is that
Yes. Yeah.
anything further, Councillor? Okay, Councillor Harris.
I'd like to move an amendment that we hold this off to December council meeting, and for 2 reasons. One being we could still, on the understanding here at the table tonight, we could still get it through by October 21 if necessary, and changes might come in by then. I'm moving the amendment that way without putting it off longer, because if the changes don't come, then we can get stuck with time. So it's a bit sooner, still gives us more time. So I'd like to simply move amendment that we put this off to the council meeting of December.
So can I just suggest that sounds like an adjournment, same thing to me, to adjourn it to the December council meeting?
I get the same thing. Yes.
It becomes a formal motion and we follow that process.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a formal amendment to adjourn the matter until the December council meeting, because you have to have that date in the adjournment motion. Anything you want to speak any further to the?
No, because the previous speakers have explained it to us.
Do I have a seconder for the adjournment? Councillor Nguyen, do you wish to speak to it? Okay. Any further debate to the adjournment?
Just wanted to really ask what, I guess, understand the amendment's been put, but I guess what are the pros and cons really for the administration of both, I guess not dealing with it now and adjourning. Can I just see what the pros and cons are?
Christian, CEO.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, I understand the sentiment. My concern is that we don't want to be caught out in what might end up being a tighter time process. It's not so much the ire of the Electoral Commission, but a council that's seen not to comply. I worry about the brand damage. Yes, we may have enough time if it goes to December. I have no idea when the legislative reform may or may not occur. It is, of course, council's decision, but I just wonder whether much is gained by moving it to a couple of months. But that's your call, of course.
Point of order.
Well, let's see how we go. Point of order, Councillor Barnett.
My point of order, I believe, is that the motion for adjournment falls under the classifications of motions that it has to be put immediately and you can't discuss it.
That's a good point of order. We just refer to the meeting procedures, because I think that's correct. Certainly the other formal motions are.
Still got a few grey hairs.
I think so. I can't see a single grey hair.
I know. I wouldn't like my hairdresser to.
Chair, we're bereft of the guidance at the moment. So
That's right, Jess has got the meeting procedures
Right.
here. You just have a look at formal motions.
formal motions.
Because if you said the word deferred, it's probably different, isn't it?
No, I take it as adjournment.
Yeah.
With We've debated on deferrals.
Well, you're discussing it now. We don't know the rules. You
there-
might be speaking out of turn, fella.
Yeah. If it's, if
It could be rolling points of order, Alyssa.
Yeah.
Councillors, all stay quiet. We're waiting for the answer.
lays on the table, if it,
Motion be put,
if that the motion be put,
all without debate. There are 5.
That's correct, Chair.
I rule in favour of the point of order under section 225 of the Act of 1993. I may or may not have those numbers right. Part 2.61, whatever, that Councillor Bennett is correct. There will be no debate on this item. It's been moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Nguyen, that the item be adjourned until the December council meeting. I put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? It is thus carried and therefore is adjourned. Oh. Excitement on my birthday. It's great.
It's your birthday. You haven't mentioned it tonight yet.
Only 1,000 times, I think.
Sorry.
I think 1,000 times.
Your birthday.
Yeah.
You didn't get invited?
It was Mayor Breers. It was Mayor Breers the day before yesterday. 10.6 grant funding application, Black Spot program recommendations on page 92. Someone happy to move it in its current form?
refer to the ward council.
Councillor Nguyen, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, please. I'd like to support the recommendation for council to submit the grant application. Any improvements in to increase safety for drivers and pedestrians in our cities are welcome. I do wonder though whether the roundabout at the on Galway Avenue, Jellicoe Street and Room Street will fit the funding criteria. So maybe question through the chair to the director, CEO.
Good question, CEO.
Can I do it through you, Chair, to the director, please?
You can.
I refer it. Thank you.
Director.
Chair, unfortunately, no, that intersection does not meet Black Spot's criteria. This intersection is the only intersection in the city of Prospect that meets the Black Spot funding criteria.
Yeah.
Do you know that? Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, it was kind of disappointing when I read the report that at this intersection there'd been 3 casualty crashes, all due to failure to give way, and that there was no action from council to improve the situation. However, having said that, I do hope that we do get a successful outcome for the grant, and I look forward to the consultation.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pearce,
I'm happy to second it.
would you like to speak to it?
No, thanks.
Any further debate?
Just a quick,
Councillor Harris?
Mine's just a question.
Yep.
And I think I know the answer before I ask, and if you want to direct it. So, Main North Road and Regency Road and down the bottom as well, they don't come under this black spot business?
We don't own those roads, I suspect. CEO, can I just clarify that with the director? Is that the reason?
Yeah.
So,
Yes, it did own roads. This Black Spot funding is for local government roads. Oh, sorry, it can apply
thank you.
themselves, but we can't apply on their behalf.
So the state can apply because Black Spot's a federal program.
Right. So just one quick more question, because I support what's happening here. Can we then later on, maybe not urgent business, but somewhere put a motion through yourself, through CEO, and that we call on Deputy to try and do something about those corners as a black spot?
In answer to that, I've written on your behalf about Regency Main North.
Yeah.
We haven't specifically asked them to apply for Black Spot, I don't think, but that's a good suggestion. Thank you. Did you wish to speak to the motion while you've got the floor?
I'm happy. I sometimes go down there and drop people off, and I see it's not a very good intersection downhill, and anything makes a street corner safer, I support.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barnett.
yes, I go down that way frequently because one of these residents are cut through, mainly so I can get onto Regency Road and then over and do a right turn into Churchill Road, because it's very difficult to turn right turns on Churchill Road. And along there I have noticed that you virtually have to go, or not virtually, you do have to go out and poke your car out quite forward So I'm very pleased to see that this has come up. Support it.
Thank you. Any further debate? Back to you, Councillor Nguyen, if you wish to sum up. No, that concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Next item is 10.7, the COVID-19 Recovery Package Stage 2 recommendations on page 97, 98. And I'll just urge you look at the screen. Staff have changed part 2B. Promote network prospects, new web page, business directory, members to beyond council boundaries, and that same allocation, just different wording. Somebody happy to move it as presented on the screen?
Question.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
First, if I may.
Question? Yes.
Okay, so my question would ultimately end up with the director. I just wanted to ask for clarification around some of the terminology in here, particularly as it relates to the part of the report referring to retail vacancies on Prospect Road. So a couple of things. Retail vacancies, typically, I guess we've got a standard measure of what that means, and that might be across the sector, and that's a good measurement of the health of our main roads. So is this retail vacancies as in there's nothing there and someone could let that space, or is this retail vacancies including that scenario plus also businesses which appear to have shut down temporarily or permanently due to COVID-19?
So you're happy for the director to
Thank you, Chair.
field that? Yes, thank you, Director.
Okay, through the chair, and thank you for the question. The actual title, what we've got there is vacancies. It could be more accurately titled vacancies and short-term closures. We actually did those measurements during COVID from the perspective of seeing what the impact of COVID was and the government's closure of certain types of businesses like gyms and other kinds of restaurants. So we put that measurement in place, and we've been consistently measuring that every 8 weeks, and we're proposing to measure that every 3 weeks just to get a feel for the vibrancy of the area and the economic health. But what we could do moving forward is, for the ones that we've actually measured here, call it vacancies and short-term closures, because some of those businesses, well, they were all closed and not open for business, but there was a crossover between what was closed due to COVID and what was vacant, as in the normal understanding of vacant and for lease. Going forward, what we'll do is actually just be measuring those that are actually vacant and for lease.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Deputy Mayor?
Answers that question. I have another question.
Second question.
So again, the terminology retail, is that set aside for businesses that sell products, or is that all commercially lettable spaces?
Director?
Through the chair, that is primarily retail. What we're using is standard measures that JLL and Colliers use. So, for instance, they don't actually measure in these main street scenarios the vacancy in the top floor of the Morris building. If you were to do it on a square metre basis, that would actually blow our vacancy rates out of the water, because it's 1,001 square metres. But they're actually, what JLL and Colliers do is measure retail vacancies as in shop fronts, which is a very simple measure rather than the more complex measure about number of square metres to let. So what we use is a simpler method which we can report on quite readily.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay.
I just have another point of order, I'm sorry.
Point of order, councillor Barnett.
Yes, is because it hasn't been moved or seconded there, and we don't have any suspension of standing orders, we're actually discussing something that is not before us.
What section of the Act are you quoting?
Oh, that well-known section.
225? I rule no. It was a question to get clarity. And yes, it was a long answer, but the question was quite short. I now seek a mover for the motion as it's on the screen. Do I have a mover? Deputy Mayor, did you wish to speak to it rather than ask questions? Not that you can't ask more questions.
Oh, can I ask questions? I don't see the need to ask questions at this point in time. Thanks to the Director for the report, and thanks for the clarification. I guess there's some good news in this for us as well. It's talking about how we've fared over the last 6 months from a commercial retail vacancy perspective, and regardless of the definition, as we can see, the numbers there are quite challenging, but it's good to see them heading in the right direction. And part of that can certainly be based on what we did to help businesses out over that period of time. This motion, COVID-19 Recovery Package Part 2, seeks to extend, repurpose some of the money that we had set aside, just point it in a different direction. It's an important part of continuing to grow the brand of Network Prospect and to do what we need to do to grow Prospect as a destination for a whole range of businesses, retail or commercial or whatever it might be. So that's definitely part of what we're looking to achieve from a strategic outcome perspective. So I trust that the Director and his team will use the money very wisely and deliver good value for money and also deliver ways that we can continue to promote the businesses that are based in the City of Prospect through those 3 initiatives.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Barnett, do you wish to speak to it or ask questions?
Yes, I'm just wish to 2-part B. Yes, 2-part B. Promote Network Prospect new web page, business directory. I just have a question. Is that going to be an e-business directory, like on the website? It's not going to be a printed version, which can usually go out of date quickly?
It is only, I believe, a digital directory. I think it's never been printed. CEOs that.
Yes, it is. It's all online, councillor, and nothing's going to be printed. It's simply promoting businesses online, either by way of an online directory or promotion through social media channels.
Thank you.
Anything further, councillor Barnett? Any further debate? Councillor Groot?
Sorry to possibly contradict what the CEO just said. I thought in the paper, and I'm just trying to find page 101, says HWR Media completing a hard copy business directory. Page 101, paragraph 3.
CEO under section 225 of the Act.
Yeah,
So point of order.
We didn't have any of that here. Don't worry
my
about that.
profuse apologies. That was not my understanding, Director. Through you, Chair.
Through the chair, HWR Media have done a separate business directory. They've got 60 individual prospect business subscribing to a hard copy business directory, which will be essentially quite short-lived, but they'll distribute it amongst the local businesses. So that is a hard copy one, but we're providing a little bit of money to it. But at the end of the day, it's a private business directory run by essentially the people who do tourism magazines and those kind of things. They've just ventured out from tourism brochures to local government.
Sorry, councillor?
So it's a private business spending public money to produce hard copy business directory, which it says is actually being delivered to all households and businesses. So that's 10,000 copies. So if it's a...
You're asking a question?
I just have the floor, don't I?
Yes.
I will go into a question. So I'm just a bit confused. So is it going to everyone, all households? Because it says in here all households plus businesses, which means it's a 10,000 copy run. And is that going to be the same look and feel as our online one, or are they going to be two competing products?
Director, it's Councillor, you'd see you're happy to the director.
I'm happy for the director to answer that one. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. They are two completely separate products, have a different look and feel. We didn't initiate the HRW media one. They simply are working the metropolitan network to get hard copy business directories with their advertising.
Sorry, one further question. So what's our financial contribution to the hard copy business directory? So to prosecute this, so
through the use of the director.
Yeah. Our financial contribution is $2,000.
Councillor?
Okay. I'm just a little confused why we would do two things, which effectively, I know we're not controlling the other one, but given that we're giving them $2,000, that's.
Through you, Chair, can I respond to that?
Money spent on it,
Very briefly.
Technically, no, but
Okay.
I'll seek leave of the meeting for the CEO to add to the director's answer. Show of hands, people happy with that? Thank you, CEO.
Thank you, Councillor. What happened was HWR approached us and said, we're going to do this anyway. You can either be part of it or not. We initially said, well, we don't think there's a market out there, but go your hardest. They went out, they got a lot of our local businesses who signed up, and they initially wanted us to put in $5,000 to $6,000. We said we're not interested in doing that, but we were a bit of a, when they'd signed up 60 businesses who wanted this, we put in a small amount, which the director has mentioned, which actually recognised the City of Prospect was supporting our businesses. It wasn't our initiative. It was kind of put upon us, and it was a bit, do you want to or not? We certainly went in for the 100%. We gave them what in the overall scheme they would have seen as a token. And we had editorial pages about the City of Prospect and what we're trying to do. We felt that it was a very small investment, that they've proven that they had signed up. This is completely different to this initiative we're putting up on the ground. My apologies if there's any confusion.
No need to apologise. Look, the money is immaterial. I mean, it's $2,000. I just think it's, unfortunately, what will happen is that business directory, the hard copy one, and it's their risk more than ours by the sounds of it, will go the same way as the Messenger and the Prospect magazine. People pick it up, flick through it, and probably end up in landfills and cost us probably $1 per household to actually dump it. So that's disappointing. And I just think it is a competitor to our online business directory. Anyway, I've said what I had to say. Yeah, I just want to pick that up because I had just heard soft copy, not hard copy.
Thank you. Any further debate? Just from the chair, I do recall this question coming up, and I expressed a very low level of support for an external provider to do a directory because I totally agree with Councillor Groot that not many people pay attention to them. I've also provided an opinion personal to the director that the online business directory is not really referred to by many people, but we have collected a really good list of local businesses, and we can use that list to work out how we promote those businesses through our other avenues such as Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and whatever else, and really take on board a bit of a promotion role to boost our businesses back during this COVID recovery period, which I think is an extraordinary thing for us to do. We've never done it before, but I think circumstances require us to think innovatively and on our feet, and I'm grateful for the staff bringing that idea to us. I'm not in favour of spending a lot of money on developing the directory itself, but I am in favour of, for instance, engaging someone smart who knows how to use those social media channels, who can liaise with the businesses and get really good footage from them or little video testimonials, which we've got a few anyway, and really work out how to pump those things out there and hopefully train the businesses themselves on how to do it. So the next round, they do it themselves. And I think that this is a very modest investment to do that, $5,000 out of our budget. But we have this money that we have available to us. I think this is a good and clever way of doing it. As I said, I'm not a supporter of the other entity. I worked for a long time in construction. We finish new buildings such as this one. We get phone calls from the Sunday Mail then, who'd say we want to run an advertising feature. They'd sucker up the builder to give them a list of subcontractors, and they'd ring every subcontractor and say, the builder's asked me to ask you to pay for an ad. So I got onto this after a few times and I said, that's not on. You're not using my name as a builder to justify your revenue sources. So we pulled out of it and we didn't play that game. the Sunday Mail doesn't do it very often now. They used to do it all the time. This is a vestige of that kind of era. And the whole print media market is really struggling how to make money out of advertising. This is not the way. A print directory is not the way. But I think our efforts and what our staff are promoting for them to do is clever, it's worth a go, and I really support these ideas that are before us. Very modest investment, and we already have the money in the bank, which we've already committed to spend on a COVID recovery program. So really this is information for us and asking our permission, but really just information. So I commend the motion to you. Any further debate? Deputy Mayor, do you wish to sum up?
Am I allowed to ask a question first?
Yes. Not as party as summing up, but you can ask a question before we go to summing up.
Yes, it's not a random, no related topic.
No new material.
I noticed that we have a couple of, and there's a
Yeah, that's
question
right.
coming. There's a couple of notice boards. I think there's one up in Barking Gardens and there's
You
one
go
down
straight
at
to your question, please.
No, I'm just giving it some context.
You're pushing your luck. Because you're in summing up, you're not supposed to introduce new information. Go straight to your question.
Okay. Are we in control of the notice boards that are, I think, in Barking Gardens and in the car park of Chanella's that purport to be a business directory that are very out of date, and the main advertising feature seems to be for a childcare centre in Brompton? So my question is, are we in control of those advertising features?
Question, CEO. Chair, I'd have to take that on notice. I'm sorry, I don't know. I wouldn't have thought Chanella's would be under our control. I would have thought one in the park would be, but I can come back to you.
I think it's in Park. I think it's in Barking Gardens. Yeah, it might be more than two. Yeah.
It's one at 5 It's worth school as well.
That's gone. Yes, they're old fashioned things. Any further questions?
No further questions.
Do you wish to sum up?
I do. Thank you. Yes.
Dominate, Pete.
I think I agree with the comments around the room and also the Mayor's sentiment. Essentially what we're doing is creating a database of businesses, and if it's a good database, then it's full of good information, it's well maintained, it's up to date, and it's used actively for a whole variety of purposes. So if the outcome of this is such a thing, then that's a good use of particularly the middle section. Look forward to seeing what the Prospect Business Leaders Group comes up with vis-a-vis recommendations for Part C. And with our current webpage for Network Prospect, I'd also encourage the team responsible for maintaining it and keeping it up to date to keep a close eye on it and making sure it's as good as it can be. And it contains current information, which should someone browse to that webpage is useful to them. So that's my summary.
Thank you. It concludes debate. All those in favour? Against is carried unanimously. Thank you. Good discussion. Item 10.8, Council Member Conference Opportunity. Recommendations at page 117. Again, I have a conflict in this item because I'll be the recipient of that outcome, even though it's training. Sorry, CEO, have we changed our policy with that regard? Can you just remind me?
In terms of the conflict?
In terms of it, is training and development still a conflict under our rules? Excuse me. Through you to the Director, Jim.
Specific with that, but I don't believe so. In terms of declare conflict as to leave the room, I don't believe you need to.
I will. I think I'm just might be confused with the reforms. I think the reforms are trying to clarify that should not be a cause for conflict, but that means that's a change that we don't have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I might just keep asking you questions, CEO, because otherwise I was going to hand over to.
We can have a secret ballot. Who takes it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it a perceived conflict?
Yeah.
It's not, because it's a
Stay.
material, under the current, it's a material
It's
benefit.
It is,
It's
yeah.
rubbish.
It's in my interpretation, I don't receive the money directly. It's not a benefit to me financially. It's a benefit to me in terms of knowledge and experience, which I do on behalf of the city and the people of Prospect. Like, it's not going to help me professionally, finish my plumbing at home, which is what I really need to work on.
Do you know anyone that makes
Come on.
But then you've got a loss.
That's right. It's actually a loss.
Opportunity loss.
CEO, I am going to vacate the chair.
Could you find the deputy mayor, please, on the way?
I could find him in the
Happy to be the deputy to the deputy.
visiting on the way to
Okay.
somewhere.
We will await.
And if there's not a deputy mayor soon, you'll need to take a vote.
I think we should take a vote. Councillor Harris.
Yeah,
Just have a vote.
You have to move.
Oh, what a shame.
The deputy mayor is here. I'm going to vacate the chair.
All right.
Good that you're with us, deputy mayor.
You know, just checking my hair.
So
Oh. Have you gone to Shane Warne's studio, have you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Very Matthews, actually.
it's just a simple vote.
Yeah.
Their studio, is that who?
Sorry, the mayor going off.
To, yeah.
Yeah.
So moved.
Okay, so we obviously have reviewed the motion and I'm looking for someone to move the motion.
Yes.
Moved.
Do I have a seconder? Would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Ripp, would you like to speak to the motion? Would anybody else like to contribute to the discussion around this motion? Done or dusted? Okay, Councillor Groot, over to you to
I
summarise.
think enough has been said.
Thank you. Okay, so can I ask for all those in favour to raise their hand? All those against? Motion's carried unanimously.
That was just exquisite.
Well done, Matt. For your best work there. Some of your best work.
Absolutely. Brilliant.
Thank you.
And stay and go to the next one and continue
Right?
Even
till he gets back.
rubbish. Even though it's rubbish, it's sort of rubbish, but it is actually under the Act a material benefit. It's wrong though. It's crap.
That's what we're trying to change.
It's absolute nonsense. It's not a material benefit to go and represent you.
Yeah, so
They get up, deputy mayor, part-time chair.
It was his best performance.
You missed the magic.
Yeah, thank
I got
you.
him over the line in the end.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tussle.
Thank you. I literally don't know how I'm going to get there yet, which is extraordinary in this country. Please, members, as we go to reports for information, please don't ask me to ask the CEO any questions.
General business of an urgent.
We've got a new CEO.
What's happening tonight, though?
revolving chairs.
Yes, general business of an urgent nature. Is there any? Deputy Mayor.
It has been suggested to me that it's rather urgent that we wish the mayor a happy birthday. I'd just like to table that.
Yeah,
Happy birthday, Mayor.
thank you very much. Yeah.
40th birthday.
Very, very nice. Yeah, that was urgent because I can't do it tomorrow.
No, that's right.
Actually, I believe Mayor Robert Breer's birthday was only
Days
yesterday.
ago.
So he took his councillors out for dinner and drinks.
Did it really?
Do you believe that, or do you know that for a fact?
Did they get invited back to his place for?
Is there any other general business of an urgent nature?
Something afterwards?
Are they socially distant?
The question we had for the CEO. Moving on then, reports for information under 12.1. We'll adopt these on block unless they are
That we have to worry about.
withdrawn.
Here's 12.1.
There's only one. That's it. Oh, there's only one. Sorry.
So funny you missed it.
That many questions we've got for you.
Anybody like to move the mayoral monthly activity report? Councillor Groot, I'll take. Do you wish to speak to it? And Councillor Ripp, I saw second. You happy to second it? Any? You wish to speak to it? Any debate? That concludes debate. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Oh no, that's fine.
So do I have to open it up?
I was just looking for our meeting in here, that face-to-face one. I couldn't see it in.
I'm voting.
Obviously, it's
All those in favour? Against? It is carried. It's in there generically.
an amendment.
Council member reports and briefings. Are there any?
Wouldn't dare.
Deputy Mayor.
What about the
Yes. So I've actually down somewhere. Oh yes, here we go. So I, for some reason, have been asked to be on the judging panel for the 4th year in a row for the Local Government IT in South Australia 2020 Awards Program, which recognises and rewards excellence in information technology and information management across local government.
Brilliant.
And I've been on the judging panel for 4 years. I haven't seen City of Prospect come up as a nominee too many times. So not sure whether the team could look into opportunities for the potential to be recognised for excellence across this part of what we do. And if appropriate, I'd like to encourage them to.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we could supply the criteria and whatever to the CEO to disseminate. Thank you. Any further items, council member reports and briefings? Councillor Harris.
Stand for this one, if I'm allowed, and see. I attended across, which way we're facing, across the road, the funeral place, not last Sunday, the Sunday before, for a local resident that went, a civil Wakefield. And I'm not sure if this is where, because a lot of people ask me, was I here on behalf of the council? And when I saw not many other people were from the council, I automatically said I'm one of them. So yes, and she was a local woman that was most probably at one time, particularly the time when a lot of us were fighting against South Africa and apartheid. She was a very, very strong South Australian woman. She come from South Africa. She had the same problems most other darker skinned people had. She was part of the ANC, African National Congress. She fought many battles here for women in particular, and then particularly darker coloured women and children. And I think of all the things, particularly Christina raises every now and then when we lose someone and she talks about the things, I think Sybil was way up there of what she done for women, for children, and particularly the people of Africa. She was chased here by the federal police. She was the enemy of the state many times, but she never ever blinked with her and her family. And I think Prospect should be very proud. And the reason I think I'm doing it in the reports is maybe I should ask the mayor, could we just drop the two daughters a line saying how a woman of Prospect that we're so proud of that is now gone.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to. If you're able to provide some contact details, fantastic. Yep.
She lived in Elizabeth Street, I should say, so people knew where she did live.
Excellent. Thank you. Any further member reports or briefings? No, we'll move on then to motions on notice. We have three. First one, 14.1, Verge Development Policy on page 125. Councillor Barnett.
Yes. In regards to this and encouraging everybody to vote for it, I'd like us to think of all the good environment work that Prospect Council is undertaking to reduce our urban heat island effect. Heat mapping, a resilient East Regional climate change adaptation plan, our green tunnel, planting more street trees for shade, our waterwise efforts, all our efforts in recycling and reduction of plastic. Creating and using more single-use plastics, such as artificial grass, is contrary to Council's intent and our policies and to our state government's recently announced strategy. Other residents and I have been concerned about the apparent increase by our own observations in the use of artificial grass in a number of street verges and also in private gardens. Think of the kilometres of footpath verges in the city of Prospect and the potential to have artificial grass installed if we continue to do nothing about discouraging it. We have to ask ourselves, why would we be paying to plant trees to cool streets when others are laying fake grass to heat them up? In passing this motion to investigate, and I stress it's investigating, the use of artificial grass on council verges, it may be that it canvasses that any policy change won't be retrospective or affect those who already have artificial turfs on their verge, but it will prevent any new applications or installations, hopefully, if it's passed. In my research, and others in the community have assisted me with this, artificial grass became popular across Australia during the millennium drought when strict water restrictions were imposed. However, it has since been criticised by environmentalists for its adverse impact on biodiversity. Artificial grass products are made from non-renewable resources, plastic and oil, which have a higher embodied energy footprint compared to natural landscaping, and also creates a non-recyclable waste stream. It's not biodegradable. After a long life, from 15 to 25 years, it will ultimately end up in the landfill. Both the rubber granules, often the rubber granules and the synthetic fibres of artificial turf are subject to wear and can be washed into the environment. Second only to tyre and road wear particles that make up a large portion of the fine road debris, the rubber granulate from artificial turf infill constitutes a significant source of rubber pollution. It forms its own ecosystem because of the heat and humidity that it has. If it's in the sun and it's a hot day, it gets to the point where it's hot to touch. It needs to be topped up with sand or fibre to keep it looking good, and you still get weeds coming through. In passing this motion, there's the opportunity for our staff to come up with alternatives to fake grass for residents to consider. Identifying alternatives that have a better environmental impact and at the same time assist residents who want to make their verge and their street look better. Council must provide better alternatives to overcome whatever the reasons are that residents have chosen artificial grass.
1 minute if you need it.
Instead of artificial grass, our council verge policy could be encouraging plants that are in line with our strategic plan's sustainable environmental principles. Suitable for local site conditions, considering the existing soil type, rainfall and site orientation, hardy and long-lived species, non-invasive, drought tolerant, using native species well adapted to our climate, and provide valuable food and habitat to birds and other wildlife. Lawn that is water-wise turf variety that will cope with heat and drought. Council should be encouraging pervious materials instead of fully impervious materials such as paving and concrete, except perhaps for crossover and footpath. This includes impervious membranes under mulch or other materials such as black plastic. Instead of black plastic, Council should be approving weed matting that allows exchange of air and water. So let's have a verge policy that actually assists and encourages our residents to improve our urban biodiversity through verge gardens in our streets. The more plants in an area, the cooler it can be, which is particularly useful in our summer. Studies by the Heart Foundation have found neighbourhoods with more plants encourage more people to walk for short trips. This is important for physical and mental health of our residents and visitors. So I urge you to support this motion and vote for Council to assist its residents to help improve our environment, including greening our city and reducing our urban heat island.
In the nick of time. Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor, you wish to speak to it?
Yes, well, thanks for putting forward the motion, Councillor Barnett. I guess what would be interesting, what will be interesting, which will come into this, is to the development of a policy, and we're talking specifically about artificial grass. But as we know, technology moves fairly rapidly across lots of things that we do. So maybe in the future, this type of artificial treatment won't be as toxic and as sort of, in the same state as it currently is. Maybe it'll be made out of different materials. Maybe it'll perform different functions. So I guess the policy will be developed and it will come back to us for review, which will give us some flexibility to take into account what might happen in the future. But I think it's a good idea.
Thank you. Further debate? Councillor Harris.
Yeah, I was just going to add a couple of things, particularly the last point that come. I'm going to support it and quite happily support it, but it's a couple of little concerns. One of them, that currently at the moment with the grass, and the councillor, when she spoke, she said a life cycle 15 to 20 years and that. And just as we lost a tree over at Nailsworth for this same argument, when we were looking for the artificial grass there, the people doing it would only guarantee it for 9 to 10 years that it would start to rip up, and all those points you put out. So it wasn't even that long. It was only 9 to 10 years at the cost. We've also got a thing with the Broadview Oval thing that part of the bowling club, and I emphasise part of the bowling club, want to do a whole pitch or whatever you have for bowling, you know, a whole area there for competition, and there's quite a few that aren't happy with it. I do have concern in the immediate future. If we say no, don't have the green grass, or not grass, I shouldn't even call it that, the green plastic, those that don't want to grow grass would look, to my idea, would look to try and put down, and I nearly swore then, I'm glad I didn't, grey dolomite. And if you look at the prospects of grey dolomite out in the street, it's not that much difference to grass. The heat comes off it, it goes down into the gutters. So the alternative to these people that just want to have imitation lawn, and I don't really know why they do, but the imitation lawn is possibly a product that's nearly, not as bad, but nearly as bad. So I have that concern, but definitely if we take on what the seconder said, that we should make sure when we do something proper through another meeting, and that is we leave that avenue, that as time goes along, if we find other alternatives, that we can go down that track. But apart from that, I think we should be moving towards getting rid of, in our streets, the plastic grass.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Wynne.
I'm happy to support, and thank you, Councillor Barnett, for bringing this forward. I hope in the investigation it can come back to us with alternatives. What is a good substitute for the fake grass, so that we can give our residents options. And yeah, so I look forward to seeing our report coming back to us.
Thank you. Just briefly from the chair, it'd be really good to see. Not that I think you personally have a thermal gun, but there are a lot of them around nowadays for COVID purposes. It would be really good if the investigation could actually measure the temperature of the grey dolomite and an artificial grass and a real grass. Because I think the issue about banning is a pretty draconian step, which we may choose to do. But certainly information supply to residents is very, very helpful. And I don't think most residents would understand that artificial grass can get really hot unless they've rolled around on it. Their kids would know, but the parents might not know. But if we've given some easy data that says this is 10 degrees hotter, they might go, crikey, I don't want that in front of my house. And they might make their own decisions. And I don't think we've got that information. And any decent mechanic, I'm not one, has it to check engine temperature and radiator temperature, and they're a gun. They just point them at it. You don't even need to touch the surface. So I would imagine it's not a very difficult process to do. And I would really like to know what the list of alternative is that's not grass, because that needs water and mowing and whatever. And are there other things that can be done? And I would have thought a quick kind of online international search might be helpful too, because we're not the only dry place that has nice streets. I'm sure there's problems come up somewhere else, and there might be alternatives somewhere else that I'm not aware of. But it's a really interesting topic, and I'm grateful for Councillor Barnett bringing it here to initiate a bit of a look at it, and to also, I presume, draw upon what other councils have done. I know City of Marion's had this debate, and a couple of others too. So a bit of a body of knowledge around this topic, but do so from an evidence point of view, not just a reactionary point of view. Notwithstanding, I'm not a big fan of single-use plastics, and I think the state government's already made their position really clear, and you could draw a connection between artificial grass and single-use plastics. They haven't yet, but they have declared that pathway on other items. So it's not a long bow. So thank you, Councillor Barnett. I'll be voting in favour if I need to, which I don't think I do, if everyone stays at the table. Any further debate? Councillor Ripp.
Yeah, it could be answered by the mover in summing up. But I just wanted to check, is this a report on a report to develop a policy, or the report be like a draft version of the policy? So I just wanted some clarification just on that, probably just in summing up. I'm happy to obviously support the intent of it. Also, just wanted to check, probably following on from Councillor Harris's comment, that, is the replacement product worse? And, if residents are maintaining the land, what gets put down instead? I think that needs to obviously be addressed as well. And I'm also assuming with the motion that the mover is only talking about the council-owned land in terms of the verge. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Well, happy to support the intent, but if we can just get some clarification on what I've just said, then that would be great.
Terrific. Any further debate? Councillor Barnett, wish to sum up.
That some residents who, along with myself, completed a Prospect Living Smart course online, and they've indicated that they would volunteer to adopt a verge and to assist those that perhaps aren't able to or don't want to maintain it. And I'll forward information about Vincent Council in Western Australia, which has some quite very interesting attitude to verge gardens, which even, like having tree swings on them and all that sort of thing. So just thinking if one council in Australia can revolutionise their verges, well then perhaps we can look at that in this verge development which includes the wording in the motion as well.
Thank you. That concludes debate. All those in favour? Against? Is carried unanimously. Item 14.2, school playgrounds. Deputy Mayor, page 126.
So I will start by reading out the motion. I'll read it not there because that's much bigger. So the council writes to the Department of Education, as well as Nailsworth Primary School, Prospect Primary School and Prospect North Primary School, seeking the use of school facilities such as playgrounds and ovals by the wider community after school hours. So I will now speak to the motion. I'd asked the director to do a little bit of research for me. Thank you very much, Simon. I'll just read it out as it's written because I think it summarises it more succinctly than if I just rambled on. So it has been our experience that most government schools were amenable to public access of ovals and play areas without a formalised agreement for some period of time. This changed in our council area in 2017 following a series of vandalism attacks at the Prospect Primary School. Prospect Primary School erected security fencing around their school perimeter, which unfortunately removed their play space from community access. However, their oval remains dedicated community space because of a joint user agreement, and we have constructed specifically for this site. This agreement with the Department of Education through Prospect Primary School for the oval out of school hours was signed in 2016 and done in exchange for use of the oval. Council undertakes basic maintenance of the oval, i.e. maintenance. The Department of Education has a resource titled Community Use of School Facilities that provides guidelines for the use of facilities. The link is blah, 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 blah. Essentially, it is up to the individual school to negotiate with bodies such as local government. So there's a couple of things there which is useful to have a think about. First of all, we've got a good cooperative agreement with Prospect Primary School in this instance. I don't know whether we have, I think we used to have something similar with Nailsworth Primary School where we had access to the school oval and we used to maintain it, and I don't know whether we have anything with Prospect Primary School. I'm sure this has been asked before. I'm sure this is not the first time this has come to us or the first council that has tried this, but I think it is, it's worthwhile going down this path because, as we had the deputation earlier on in the meeting, and the question from the public around more and more space for children to go out and do things, and we can't continue to fund everything that we think we could. However, this to me seems like a perfect opportunity to open up those conversations with them. Obviously, you would go into it looking at the risks and benefits for both parties and try to work out whether there's some benefit for us. I think there would be. It would be quite clear. Is there benefit for the school of going down this path and any of the schools and going down this path? And I think my answer to that also is that with a little bit of, not even creative thinking, but a little bit of investigation, there would be benefits. One benefit could be, for example, that if we are essentially activating those spaces, I'm not talking about 24-hour-a-day access. I'm talking about from when school finishes until sun goes down type stuff and potentially on weekends. There's no doubt that a more active place is less prone to vandalism and less prone to crime and all those kind of things like that. We know that for sure, and that's one of the benefits we get out of activating all of our spaces around the city. So as a benefit to the school, I think that's something that we can offer them. I'm not advocating that we enter into any financial agreement with them because that's not what the motion is asking, but there are obviously some barriers that were put up, and I'm not meaning physical barriers, but some barriers as to why this has happened. And I think that with some decent discussions, we could uncover some opportunities there. So the question really was to ask the team to go and have a chat with these schools. It looks like we can go individually to the schools. We don't have to go through the Department of Education. There's not an overriding policy that says, no, you can't. It's up to the intent of the school. So given that schools are such an important part of our community, and we do a lot, thank you, we do a lot for and with our schools, I think we've built a good relationship and something which we could leverage. So I'd encourage the team to think about the approach, which I'm sure they would, and to go into it with an open mind. We might not get the perfect answer, which is, yeah, let's tear down those fences and you can have access to it. So we might not get that straight away, but if we don't start this conversation and if we don't have a plan to develop the conversation over a period of time, then we'll certainly never get there. So I look forward to seeing what the team can do.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Yeah.
So Barnett, we should speak to it.
Yes, I think it's protecting the schools, obviously, and the school governing councils. I was on Prospect Primary School Governing Council for over 11 years, and part of this keeping the school grounds and digging holes for play equipment and all that. So I think we need to, if we don't start the dialogue and start the discussion, we'll just have the status quo, the big black fences all around our schools. So it will be respecting each of those schools and the effort that the parents and the staff put into them, and to some degree the education department. But after all, these schools are government schools. They're using our taxpayer money and their own fundraising efforts. So I think there's room for dialogue to start the discussion. So I support the motion.
Thank you. Do I have any further debate? Councillor Good.
Yes, look, I'll be supporting the motion, but I do so with some degree of caution, having been on the other side of this debate as a member of the Governing Council at Prospect Primary School, where I raised a similar issue with the Governing Council to try and open up the gates after I joined, and the gates and the fences had just been put up. And it was put to me, I think for good reason, why the fences and the gates have been put up, and it is around vandalism. It's around the loss of, I think, 3 or 4 classrooms by a fire started by somebody taking a scooter and setting it alight underneath the classroom, and that destroyed a whole lot of teachers' work and students' work and all sorts of other things. So as a result, the Education Department put up the fences, and as I understand it, once you have the fences, if you don't lock it and you have an insurable event, insurance won't cover that because you haven't taken all precautions to make sure the site's locked up. There are also other issues with schools being very large sites. If you lock the gates at night, you don't know who's in the building or in the ground. So you could actually lock some kids in, which is not the intended purpose of trying to create more access. So look, I agree. I think we do need to open them up. I don't know what the creative solution is, but I'm really looking forward to maybe our staff to negotiate that with the schools concerned. The other thing, we're kind of in this really interesting moment of time around COVID-19 as well. So school directions now, I think across most schools, if not all, as soon as school is over, you pick up your child and you leave. There is no playing after school anymore. Same with morning school drop-off. It's very much a clinical drop-off and go. So it's kind of interesting timing because the schools will be arguing quite rightly that opening that up produces creates a health risk that is probably not outweighed by the benefits of having open space for kids after hours and on weekends. So I think it's just interesting timing, but that is where we're at the moment. Probably will be for at least the next term, if not into next year as well. So commend the motion. I think it's a good, it's noble in what it's trying to do. I think without some some investment in moving infrastructure. And I think of Nailsworth as well. You know, you could actually move the gates and the fences around the oval, so it opens up the oval, but that comes at a cost. And yeah, I guess it's up for discussion as to whose cost is or where that cost is borne, whether it's by council or by schools or by someone else. So I think it's a great idea. Support the motion, and look forward to seeing what the outcome is.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Pearce?
Yeah, I'm happy to support it. I'm also concerned with the risk of public liability, where that might lay. If a child gets injured, would the risk be with the Department of Education, or would it be with the council, or nobody? Or if they're using play equipment that they weren't previously allowed to use? Not sure. And also the vandalism aspect, of course. I mean, my wife's a teacher, and that's the reason they're all locked up. They don't want people on the premises after hours. You know, if you're allowed to do that and you're wandering around and the police arrive, they say, we're just here to play, you know, just before they set fire to the place. But I commend the motion. I know where you're coming from with it, but it's a hard one.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Harris?
I'm going to say I support it. Good luck when you get to Nailsworth. I'm going to support it, but in reality, it fits into some of these comments that have happened once the gates are up, and most of them are locked, but you can still get in properly. But it does then come that insurance thing after the things, and they shouldn't, because it's just kids playing. But now they've got the gates, and I'm talking about them all, but mine in particular, across the road from me, it makes a whole different sort of setup. I will say ours had a few problems that made it more tighter as a local school against the previous director, not the nice bloke up here we got, and made some problems there that are hard to get over. But I see in the front of my house every weekend young people with their, the kids and that sort of stuff on scooters come down and try and get to the gates, and they're locked, and never used to be like that. And it is a bit sad. Sometimes I tell them how to get in, but it's a bit sad to see them go away with the kids and got to go right up to Nunuwera or another place. So I support, trying to have that conversation to get into these places.
Thank you. Just briefly from me, the reason we've had one of the petitioners tonight and a request to turn Vine Plaza into a play space is you might remember from our first representation, because the Prospect Primary School no longer allows kids to get into their playground, and she lives in a street adjacent. There's many of us that have grown up around spaces that are schools that used to play there on the weekends. They're great places, not just for the jungle gym or the other welded steel injury providers, but you could ride a bike there or a skateboard, or you could run around, or you could kick a ball. We just assumed that they were available. Things have changed. Two things. One is that vandalism's more prominent this decade or this century than it was last century, kind of. And on the other side of the fence, there's also a security issue around children leaving the school, or children being taken from the school almost always by a parent who doesn't have custody of them at that point in time. That's improving because shared custody is a lot more common nowadays, but there has been a lot of worry from schools about their duty of care to keep the student on premises, and therefore they justify the fences from that perspective as well. I think we just got to acknowledge that the world's a different place now, and that fences have a role. But equally, we're really short of open space, and we need to think creatively around how we resolve that. And Prospect Primary, when you did our park strategy, that playground was relied upon to be one within 400 metres of homes in that area. Having it closed means we have a gap. If we have a gap, to fill that, we'd need to buy a house for $800,000, knock it over and build a playground, which would cost us $300,000. It's a $1.1 million problem for us if we want to fix that. We don't have a solution at this point. We don't have $1.1 million. So I think we need to be a bit innovative around how we deal with this. We can't keep saying take the fence down because it's not that simple. I think Councillor Groot's made some really good points. Councillor Pearce talks about insurances. I don't think they're as difficult as they're made out to be because we've had that issue for a long time, but it is another issue that needs to be taken into account. But I think if we're serious about this, we'd have to go to the schools saying, we want to be a partner. We don't just want you to unlock the gate. We want to actually create a space here which works for you and works for us. And that would mean we have to put some of our money into it. Now, if you look at the playground on the corner of Prospect Primary, it's not that great. You know, it's well used. It's getting worn out. And we know that every time we touch play equipment, it all has to go off to the recycling depot. You can't just paint it. So that would be, you know, probably $250,000 to do something to that playground. And if we said, look, we want to be a partner in upgrading that, that's a whole different discussion to saying it's our taxes, open the gate. And I think we've just got to be aware that it's a different sort of conversation we need to have with the schools, particularly where we don't have another solution. And Nailsworth is different because Prospect Gardens is just around the corner, but Prospect Primary not so, and Prospect North Primary the same. We don't have, Percy Street's not far away, but it's not that big. So, yeah, I commend the motion. I look forward to the discussions, particularly take note of Councillor Groot's representation that the timing might not be ideal right now because of other safety concerns regarding COVID-19. I think that's a really good point, CEO.
Thank you.
So we'll take that on board, I think, in how we approach this and at what time we approach it. Yeah. But I'll be voting in favour should the need arise, but you all seem to be here, so probably not. Any further debate? No, Councillor, sorry, Deputy Mayor, just to sum up.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for your contributions. There's some really good points which came up, and just to summarise a couple of those, public liability has been raised as an issue, and you know that's something which we just need to collect these barriers. We need to work out how we can knock those barriers down. Vandalism concerns is an interesting one. I didn't ask the director to provide me with figures on how much money we need to spend fixing up vandalism for our extensive playground suite throughout the park, but I guess if I did ask him the question, it wouldn't be excessive. Maybe that's a different scenario. Maybe there's something about a fence that attracts people, or a school that attracts different sort of people to come and look at using it. And I do agree with the mayor that to walk in with a ratchet gun and a couple of wrenches and say we're here to take down the fences isn't going to be the approach that's going to work. But a partnership approach would work. There are almost certainly costs associated if we are able to leverage something out of this, and maybe that could be built into our park strategy down the track, some of the funds involved in doing what it might be. So, it could be a really typical Prospect thing to do, to broker a partnership with the school to open up the playground and enhance that play space for the benefit of everybody. We could look at, a whole range of interesting things such as playground monitors and volunteers getting involved and all those kind of things like that. If we walk in saying, can you just let us come in and play? They're going to say no, and I would say no as well. But if you think about our approach, and if we also take into account that it won't happen overnight, given the points that Councillor Groot made, but it might happen in a couple of years' time. If we don't ask the question now, we don't know what the climate's going to be. We don't know what the management structure is going to be. We don't know what else might have happened to open up this as an opportunity. So let's start the conversation, see where it goes, and if we don't strike up the perfect outcome for us in the first instance, then let's take some learnings out of that and then have another go and take a different angle and have a crack at it.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 14.3, treaty, page 127. Councillor Harris.
Okay, then I'll read it out, I assume. City of Prospect recognises a significant contribution to culture from our ancient history and our important connections to the Kaurna people. After recently adopting the Uluru Statement of the Heart and displaying it in our Kaurna name Bayenthi building, Council now calls for a report to be prepared which investigates the options and process for progressing to a treaty or similar agreement with the Kaurna people. As an integral part of the City of Prospect undertaking a process of agreement making with the Kaurna people, Council make available and promote the use of Bayenthi to host truth-telling forums between Kaurna people, locals and other interested parties. It's the same track that I've gone down before, so I'm not going to actually take up a whole lot of people's time tonight, although I think it's a very important thing. But there's a couple of just very important points I want to bring up. And I spoke to the Mayor today and I said I remembered something from the citizenship ceremony, and this is what I do remember. When we had the ceremony the other day, last Thursday, I think it was, and we talked to different people, and I think in total there was 20 odd different nationalities of people that were becoming Australian citizens. And we listened to their stories, and David gave them the opportunity to talk about their stories and talk about where they come from and their foods and all those things they bring into us. And then when he talked about ourselves and the fact, the reason it was on Thursday, and those that weren't there might not know, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't know until Thursday, that it was actually the citizenship was that particular day, whatever day Thursday was, in 1948. So if we had been the day before 1948, October the, whatever it was, what was Thursday?
September
the 17th. If we had been September the 15th and we were bringing your family over, they wouldn't become Australian citizens, they'd be British citizens. So it was a birth state that we became someone. But the people that already were here, walked here and that, they still weren't, they were still British citizens, they weren't Australian citizens, not until the referendum of 1967 where they had a recognition. So what I have been proud of what we're doing at the moment is the most important thing, that our history of Prospect now, in my mind, hopefully others in the end result, doesn't start in 1836. It starts back 40-odd thousand years ago. And the people that walk through, and the couple of things that I want to add that happen is maybe a very important goal as we're looking towards a treaty. The only bit of Aboriginal artefacts that they found that were here was an axe that happens to be in the museum, and it's not on display, and it's got a few cultural problems that people can't take photos. But I feel some way that axe or a replica could come to this city. Why? Because I can't see anyone here, but where you used to live and that, and you go over to Broadview, we call an area Broadview. The Aboriginal people used to call it Five View, because you could stand there and see five direct. And they didn't call it Five View, they had another word. We had the lake up here where the people play football and that stuff, and they didn't call it a lake, they had another word. But we don't know the words, because we took those words away from them. And I think we, talking with Aboriginal people, Kaurna people, because it's only one lot we talk to, because the Mandindi people unfortunately are gone, that we can sit and hopefully what the point to is we can use our building for areas, and we can sit down and maybe not even have a treaty with these people, because they might turn around, or we might turn around and say it's not going to work. But we can get something to sort of finalise that area, the people that were part of Prospect that we can see will still be part of Prospect. And I don't see, the only problem I had from the last time to now is a couple of people said, oh, heck, I'll use the word heck, oh, heck, what's going to happen? As soon as you people on the council do this, they want to come and they want to have my house and take my land off me. And unfortunately, people still feel like that. The only land that Aboriginal people can come and take, and not even that simple, but come and take, is Crown land. We don't have that in Prospect. People own their houses, so they won't take the house. So that's not a problem. But the problem is, it's the thought that some people have. So what I'm asking tonight is to follow up through the Mayor, the CEO, and particularly our staff that have helped us so far to now, is to sit down and talk to these people, offer them a thing, and say, is there a way, or should there be a way, that we can have a treaty between all people of Prospect? So when Alan or Steve or anyone wants to talk to someone, oh hell, how long's Prospect been there? Well, it's been about 40,000 years. I don't know the names of the people, but that's our history. So I'm hoping people will vote for this tonight.
You have seconded it. Councillor Barnett, I saw first. You to speak to it.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Harris, for bringing this to us. And I know that it's with the writing of our 150 years of the city of Prospect and Prospect Council and area, the book on our history, that where the local history group is really wanting to add more about our First Peoples here, and some of the things that you mentioned about the naming of different places and that. So I think this is all part and parcel, I think, of this understanding. And I think in part two, it's very interesting about host the truth-telling forums and with the between Kaurna people and locals and anybody else that's interested in this. And I think it's very important to understand that truth-telling is a basis for genuine reconciliation. And as it says in the Uluru Statement from the Heart, based on the three key consensus demands: voice, treaty and truth. And my understanding is that it's based on a restorative justice concept and reconciliation, and about the healing of memories, truth-telling, the pursuit of justice and forgiveness, and part of social justice activism. So I think truth-telling, we could build on this and build a different kind of future in the pursuit of structural justice and citizen advocacy. So I commend people to vote for this.
Thank you. Further debate? Councillor Groot.
Thank you. Look, I just want to not take away too much from what Councillor Harris said, because I think he covered it very well, but we'll certainly be supporting this motion. And as Councillor Harris was talking, I was thinking back to before we had the national apology 10 years or so ago, and the concerns people had around what happens if we apologise to the First Nations people. What's going to happen? We're going to have to pay people lots of money, or we're going to lose our land. And I think there's a bit of that hesitation around treaty as well. What does it mean for us? And I'm really excited to be part of a council who is willing to have these conversations. We've been having them for a little while now, and we've done things like joint naming of buildings, and we changed the way roads are going to be named. And the one opportunity we had, and we called this building not 128, but we called it Bayinti. And so I think we've done some really exciting things, and this is just another step in that evolution of trying to really walk the talk in terms of reconciliation with our First Nations people. I think both concepts are really exciting, the treaty, but also having this as an opportunity to host the truth-telling forums between Kaurna people and our local people that live in Prospect. So thank you, Councillor Harris, for being the advocate for this really strongly over a long period of time, and I certainly support the motion tonight.
Thank you. Further debate? Councillor Ripp.
I'm happy to support it. I guess following on from both what Councillor Harris and Councillor Groot have said, when you do Google what does, someone on the street Googles what does a treaty mean, it says a treaty calls for a treaty in Australia is a formal agreement between the government and Indigenous people that would have legal outcomes. And then it goes on to list more. Just so if we're having discussions with people in the street and they do raise this, is a treaty generally done between federal and state governments, or is it local government? Are there other examples where local governments have done treaties? So if the administration is aware of that.
That's a question?
Yes.
The short answer is, in Australia, nothing called a treaty, but several agreements at every level of government.
Yep.
So Alexandrina Council has an agreement, I can't quite remember what it's called, not the word treaty, but is the most advanced in the state, I'm told, around a range of matters. Western Australian government has a very comprehensive agreement which looks and smells like a treaty, but they haven't called it that, perhaps because their lawyers say don't do that. Canada has an agreement with its First Nations people. Certainly New Zealand did it as foundation stone. Every level of government has agreements, but not necessarily called treaties.
So I guess if someone asked us on the street, what would the administration, I guess, what would the definition of a treaty be? And if someone does ask us in terms of, because it will come up like in terms of getting questions on the street, in terms of legal outcomes, what would the best answer be for that, just to get an explanation, especially with the director as well, I think, raising his hand.
CEO and...
Well, I might just start with that, if I may, Chair.
I might answer stuff.
So treaty in its simple term just means agreement.
Okay, good.
Now I know that it's become known as a formal document like the Treaty of Waitangi in New Zealand, where it might be, that has legal outcomes. A treaty can be as simple as an MOU. So it's a name. I understand what you're suggesting, Councillor, quite correctly, is it may be misleading, but I don't think there's any suggestion that Council would go out with this without having done a lot of work around how we would communicate this. So that was my thought. Sorry, through you, Chair, to the Director.
Through the Chair, there's probably not much I could add to that. Essentially, an agreement would be the language that we would look to use. I think importantly, part one of the recommendation allows us to do that further investigation, scope it out, talk about the options of what a treaty may or may not include, whether or not an MOU is the better answer or whether or not there's something else. That's really where I'd suggest there's a bit of a weight approach beyond that very basic definition of agreement or collective understanding.
I'm happy to obviously support it, but I think we need to have a proper communication strategy around that, especially for the community, because we just need to make sure we're right on top of, right, and I guess the questions that we can anticipate. Cool.
Thank you. Further debate? Just from me, a brief memory then, rationale. I'm privileged to go to the city of Mexico where the Spanish marauders wiped out the Aztec civilization, who chose to have their city on an island in the middle of a lake because they didn't like what the Teotihuacans left behind a few miles away, even though it was very impressive. And of course, the Mayans were around before them. 4 civilizations in one place. The Museum of Anthropology is the best I've ever seen. And it's full of amazing artifacts. 3/4 of them have plaques next to them saying, we think this thing was used for this particular type of ceremony, but we're not sure. And the reason that 3/4 of the things say that is because those civilizations were wiped out by the ensuing mob that came, mostly. The Teotihuacans did themselves in somehow magically. So the difficulty that they have is that they don't have ongoing connection. We do. And I think before it's gone, it's only right and just that we glean as much as we can from the people that are here who can tell us those stories. That I think Councillor Harris outlined a couple of them, but there are many, many more. So that we don't have those plaques that say, we think, as the mob that's currently in charge, this is what the last mob did. I just think that's really inappropriate. We can do much, much better than that. And we owe it to our citizens, I think, to help them understand the long history of this place they call home, not just the short history. In terms of this particular motion, I think we do a great job of recognition, and I think we've moved forward in that in many ways, and Councillor Groot spoke about that. You know, we acknowledge at the start of every council meeting and all our formal functions, we acknowledge country. We have welcome to country at our major events. There was a decision of a couple of councils ago that we would actually do that. We didn't do it before. Councils before decided we would at every citizenship ceremony have somebody of Ghana descent come and welcome people to country. We never did that before, but we do now. And now you wouldn't take it away because it's a really good part of the ceremony. We acknowledge that the Ghana people have an ongoing connection with the land. Not just, we don't want to acknowledge our history. If you listen to what I read out at the start, listen to any acknowledgement, we acknowledge they have an ongoing connection to the land. It's not passive, it's active. And we already asked them to help us with names of streets and the building and a few other things. So we have a good recognition level, I think, and our reconciliation agreement attempts to build on that. I think what we're seeking to do now is to be more respectful of that and deepen the relationship. And so it's not just about token things like names. It's time to sort of say, if you want something that's substantial here, what does that look like? And if this land is still important to the Kaurna people, that ongoing relationship, we certainly feel like we have as stewards of the public assets at the very least, and the community as a whole, what does it mean to do that? If they think they've got that connection and we do, how would we say, well, why isn't that one kind of philosophy rather than two distinct philosophies? How does that work together? And I don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly a question. So I think what this motion is seeking to do, and I'm really pleased that Councillor Harris has put it to us, is say, how do we formalise that beyond recognition into a relationship that has structure to it? And if we get that right, how do we embed that in our policy? So, for instance, if we have another street pop up, one of the things you've got to consider is Kaurna names. But the policy doesn't quite say, and this is how you will go about that. And it could. We could say, you must consult. Every new thing you build or do, we've decided as policy, we must consult the Kaurna naming mob, whatever that body's called. There is a name, I don't recall its name. So the way we deal with this could not just deepen our knowledge and our relationship, but also guide our policy going forward to reflect what we think we mean by that. And I think we need to do that in conjunction with the Kaurna people. We just can't make that stuff up on our own. It wouldn't be appropriate. So I think that formality is a really important step. Now, when you talk about treaty, to me, that formality is part of forming that agreement. We don't have the coast or the hills or primary production areas or land that we can contribute to a treaty, but it's likely that the Kaurna people here might say, well, we really want to know what capital works projects you're doing every year, because you're going to dig holes. And sometimes when you dig a hole, you find things from our ancestors, and that stuff's important to us. And I think if the next civilization came along after us and decided to put a superhighway through North Road Cemetery, we'd go, Daisy Bates is buried there. And look, we actually, there's a few interesting people buried there. We'd like to, can you just talk to us about that? And so I think we could have an agreement that says, you know what, we'll send you our capital works program every year because we know what it's going to be. If you've got any concerns, here's the path to come back and tell us, and here's how we'll deal with those concerns. And it might be as simple as a Kaurna person will be there when the excavation component's done, to be there in case something gets excavated of interest. And there's a way of how that's done. That, in fact, was the basis of the Indigenous Land Use Agreement that started to be negotiated about 15 years ago, and after 10 years of negotiations fell over. So that discussion's already happened. So there's a really good framework we could spring from that was just around that capital works kind of relationship. So there's important work that's been done. I mentioned Alexandrina Council. I do think we've got to keep the intent and purpose of this thing really simple so we don't get distracted and disappear down funny forks in the road and get too worried about other people's interpretation of treaty. I think we keep it really simple. And I think the second part of the motion is incredibly important, because we can't possibly move forward, if we think this is forward, without knowing where we're moving from. And I only know what I perceive that we currently have in place. I don't really have a good appreciation for what the Kaurna people think about us and our stewardship concept and our concept of a council and what it does. I'd really like to know. And the people I do talk to say, I'd really like you to understand what happened to us in the last 100 years. It's really important. It's really important you understand why the Kaurna language is spoken the way it is. We don't really know the true accent because the language has been resurrected. So please appreciate that when you ask us to come and speak to you. And when you think every Kaurna person can speak Kaurna, understand they have to learn it as a new language. And I think that's just respectful to try and sit down and say, talk to us about this stuff, because that will guide us going forward. So I think the idea of having the truth-telling forums is very, very important. And just finally, I think involving all the community in that discussions really important too. I wouldn't want to be sitting here as the mayor saying, isn't council great? We've done this because we think it's the right thing to do. If the community think we're off with the pixies, it's really got to be a journey for everybody to try and get into. So I think the second part's a really important part of that. So I'll commend the motion. I really look forward to it. I don't think it'll be simple. I don't think it'll be quick, but I think it's time that we started it. Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Harris, you have the floor to sum up.
Just a couple of things back, and one of the most important thing is 1, 2, 3 people answered, particularly your question of what's a treaty and what we talk to people, and they all had a bit different or a bit confusing or not 100% right. And that's the most important part of having a treaty. It means we got to learn and someone else has got to learn what it means at the end, right? So that's very important. So when you go to talk to people, eventually, hopefully, we know what that means. So I'm not going to add more than I've always had something, but I just got these couple of little things that becomes very important. That truth-telling part of stories and things like that, and those of you who've been lucky enough to listen to Uncle Lewis talk and that, and there's many other talkers, but I come from the port and I used to see him for many times, and he knows a million stories. And a bit like me, if he's not 100% sure of them, they will fit in somehow. So it's a great part of life. And I was, this is how I'm going to finish, I was involved in the Waddy Creek when people walked off up there in the 60s and that. And I said to some Aboriginal people, because I thought I was pretty good. I thought I was pretty good in my understanding of other cultures and that. And I made a statement that I thought was quite good. And I said, well, the problem is we're all born equal, and just as life goes on, then the problems come. We're not all born equal, and that's the problem. And we can't cure that here because we haven't got hospitals here to do the right thing. We've got schools and education. But I am proud of this council and everyone sitting around the table, and even the previous one, that I think we're making a massive step to get there. The big governments fell over for a lot of reasons, but one of the major ones is federal government, state, they had to deal with about 50, 60 different nations. Here, we're talking to one. So it's a one-on-one is a better possibility. Those of you that have travelled, I've done a little bit, but not much. If you go to Europe and America, all those places, but particularly you go to Europe, you go to Austria, Italy, France and all that, that's all half the size of Australia, and they're different nations. And that's here we got, and David shows that everything, that big map of all the different nations. We're dealing with one, and I am very sure to follow this process, we will get in a good position, and hopefully we listen to the stories, we listen to the thing, and we then can talk to people when we're asked, what does it mean? So please, I hope you do this and see what happens.
Thank you. That concludes the debate. All those in favour? Against? It is carried unanimously. Terrific. Okay, questions with notice. Councillor Groot, process for demolition of properties and tree removal, page 128. Would you like to read out your question?
I need to read it out.
Never remember.
I think I do.
I'm going to rule you don't. Questions there for you. The answer I've been provided is the answer to question part 1. Council administration notes that the required process varies significantly depending on the circumstances of the matter. In relation to the specific examples based on the addresses provided in the preamble, the following processes were required. 31 Alpha Road. The owner of this property was only required to obtain building rules consent from either council or a private certifier. That assessment is only able to consider the method by which the demolition would occur. Upon receipt of the building rules consent, council is obliged and required to grant development approval for the demolition of the home. The required process would be significantly different if the property was heritage listed or located within a heritage conservation zone. Now, as with primary school, the school was required to notify council that it would be removing the tree, which it did on the 4th of September 2020. As the school is on Crown land and the removal of the tree was supported by the Department for Education, the school was not required to obtain development approval from council or any other planning authority, such as council. That's the answer to the first question. Second question, additional protections. Answer 2, demolition. Where a property or an area meet the legislative criteria prescribed in the Development Act 1993, council can seek that a property be identified as a local heritage place or that an area be rezoned from residential to historic conservation. Council administration confirmed that 31 Alpha Road has been reviewed previously and specifically for this purpose. Notwithstanding the dwelling was a good example of a grand home from a particular era, independent heritage experts advised that the criteria were not met for either the street itself or for the dwelling. Outside of these circumstances, an owner's right to demolish their home is enshrined by state legislation, Development Regulations 2008. As such, there are no further steps that council could take to prevent the owners of non-heritage listed homes within the residential zone from demolishing their home in the future. Significant tree removal. Where a tree removal on Crown land is supported by the relevant state agency, it will always be exempt from the requirement to obtain development approval. As such, there is no step that council could take to prevent similar tree removals from Crown land occurring in the future. Okay, thank you, and that'll be published in the minutes. But good, concise information for us all. There are no other questions with notice. Confidential items, the leasing of the Town Hall basement has been withdrawn by the CEO, so we don't need to be here for that item. Maybe CEO, if you wish to give a brief explanation as to why. You don't have to.
Very, very brief. We're still very much in the process of working out what best use would be. We felt it would be premature to bring very specific terms.
Yeah.
And we will bring that back to council. We believe it's a really important part of Vine Plaza and activation. We think it's something that council should be able to consider before we go ahead with the use. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And no further items on the agenda. Meeting is closed. Thanks everybody for sharing my birthday with me.
That item to come back.
Yeah.
Formal location, formal
Expecting to come back.
When we